Hello, friends. Welcome to the Sleep Aliens. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Luis Navarro had been serving with the Border Patrol for 11 years when the incident occurred. 34 years old, married, father of 2, and extremely practical. He had grown up in Tucson and knew the desert as well as most people knew their own neighborhood. He had seen smugglers, monsoons, sandstorms, and countless rattlesnakes, but he had never seen anything like what happened that July night. His partner that evening was Emma Briggs, 28 years old, a former military police officer, skeptical and sharp-eyed. It was her 3rd year on the job, and she was known for maintaining her composure under pressure. Emma wasn't easily frightened. She had entered armed confrontations without hesitation. When she saw the thing flying over the desert that night, she was shaken more than any human threat ever could. They were assigned to Sector 7, a stretch of border road west of Nogales proper. It ran parallel to the fence for about 15 miles, cutting through scrubland, dry washes, and the occasional cluster of mesquite trees. The road was gravel and dirt, rutted from monsoon rains earlier in the month. At night it was pitch black except for the glow of distant towns and the occasional ranch light miles away. Their shift started at 2100 hours. Standard patrol. Check the fence line, watch for movement, respond to sensor alerts. By 22:30, they'd driven the loop twice and seen nothing unusual. The radio crackled occasionally with chatter from other units, but their sector was quiet. "Another thrilling night in paradise," Emma said, sipping lukewarm coffee from a thermos. Luis grinned. "You miss the excitement yet?" "I miss air conditioning." It was still over 90 degrees outside. The truck's AC struggled to keep up. Through the windshield, the desert stretched endlessly under a sky so clear you could see the Milky Way. No clouds, no haze, just stars, infinite and cold. At 2247, they stopped near marker 19, a concrete post marking a maintenance gate in the fence. Luis stepped out to check the lock. Emma stayed in the truck, scanning the horizon with binoculars. The night was still. No wind, no animals, no sound except the distant hum of the engine. Then Emma saw it. At first, she thought it was a plane, a single light, amber orange, moving slowly from the southeast. But it didn't blink. Aircraft lights blink. This one held steady, glowing like an ember suspended in midair. "Luis," she called through the open door. "You seeing this?" He walked around the front of the truck and looked where she pointed. The light was maybe 2 miles out, still approaching. It moved horizontally, level with the ridgeline to the south. No sound, no engine noise, just that steady, warm glow. "Drone?" Luis suggested. "Maybe. Feels too slow." They watched it for another 30 seconds. The light continued toward them, growing slightly brighter but not faster. Then it stopped. Just stopped. Midair. No deceleration. No wobble. It hung there like a streetlight someone had nailed to the sky. Emma lowered the binoculars. "That's not a drone." Luis reached for the radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. We have a visual on an unidentified light source, approximately 2 miles south-southeast of marker 19. Can you confirm any aerial activity in our sector?" Static crackled. Then a voice. "Unit 7, stand by." They waited. The light didn't move. It pulsed once, dimming slightly, then returned to its original brightness. Still no sound. The desert around them remained perfectly silent. "Unit 7, we have no registered aircraft in your area. No drones, no Border Patrol aviation units. What's the light doing now? Luis keyed the mic. It's stationary, hovering about a mile south of the fence line. Can you get closer? Emma shot Luis a look. He shrugged. Copy that. Moving to investigate. They climbed back into the truck and drove west along the access road, keeping the light in view. As they moved, the light began to move as well, not toward them parallel. It tracked their position, maintaining the same distance, the same altitude. Okay, that's weird, Emma muttered. Luis slowed the truck. The light slowed too. He accelerated. So did the light. It matched their speed perfectly, gliding through the air as smoothly as if it were on rails. Dispatch, the object is mirroring our movement. Still no sound. No visible structure, just the light source. Copy. Continue observation. We're checking with Customs and Air Force radar. They drove another quarter mile. The light stayed with them, a silent companion drifting through the night. Then it changed direction. Without warning, it veered left and descended toward the desert floor. It dropped fast, too fast, and disappeared behind a low hill. Emma grabbed the door handle. Did it land? I don't know. Let's find out. Luis turned off the main road and onto a rough track that led toward the hill. The truck bounced over rocks and ruts. Emma braced herself against the dash. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating nothing but sand and brush. They crested the hill and stopped. Below them, in a shallow basin maybe 300 yards wide, the light was back. But it wasn't alone. There were 3 of them now. 3 orange lights arranged in a perfect triangle, hovering about 20 feet off the ground. They pulsed in sequence, one after another, like a slow, deliberate heartbeat. The light they cast was soft but intense, illuminating the ground beneath them in a warm, amber glow. Luis killed the engine. The silence was immediate and total. No wind, no insects, nothing. Emma's hand moved to her sidearm. What are we looking at? I don't know. They sat there watching. The lights continued their slow pulse. After a moment, the triangle began to rotate. Slowly at first, then faster, spinning in place like a carousel. The lights blurred together, creating a single ring of glowing motion. Then they stopped. Snapped back into perfect triangular formation. Luis reached for the radio, but his hand froze. The radio was dead. No static, no hum, just silence. He tried the truck's ignition. Nothing. The dashboard was dark. Even the headlights had cut out. Luis? Everything's dead. Emma tried her handheld radio. Same result. She looked at her watch. The hands had stopped. My watch, too. The lights below them pulsed again. Brighter this time. Then they began to rise. Slowly, deliberately, they lifted off the desert floor and climbed toward the ridge where Luis and Emma sat. The triangle held its shape, moving as one unified object. No visible connection between the lights, just synchronized motion. Luis's heart pounded. We need to move. The truck's dead. Then we get out and move. But neither of them moved. They were transfixed, unable to look away as the triangle rose closer, closer, until it was level with their position. The lights were maybe 50 yards away now, close enough to see that they weren't solid. They had depth, layers of luminosity that seemed to pulse from somewhere inside. And they were hot. The air around them shimmered like heat off asphalt in summer. Emma felt pressure in her chest. Not pain, but weight. Like the air had become thicker, harder to breathe. She heard a sound, low and rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. But it wasn't coming from outside. It was inside her head. Do you hear that? She whispered. Luis nodded. He heard it too. A deep, resonant thrum that vibrated through his skull and down his spine. It wasn't unpleasant, but it wasn't natural either. It felt deliberate, like something was reaching into his mind and tapping gently on the door. The triangle rotated again, this time facing them directly. For a moment, Luis had the strangest sensation that it was looking at them. Not the lights themselves, but whatever controlled them. He felt seen, observed, studied. Then it moved. The triangle shot upward so fast it left a trail of after-images burned into their vision. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone, vanished into the black void above. No sound, no exhaust, just gone. The pressure in their chests released, the thrum in their heads faded, and slowly the world returned to normal. The truck's dashboard flickered to life. The headlights blazed. The radio crackled with static. Unit 7, do you copy? Unit 7, respond. Luis grabbed the mic, his hand shaking. Dispatch, we copy. We're okay. What happened? You went silent for 16 minutes. 16 minutes. Luis looked at Emma. It had felt like 2, maybe 3 at most. We had an equipment malfunction, Luis said carefully. Everything's functioning now. Roger that. Return to base for vehicle inspection. Copy. Luis started the truck and turned it around. As they drove back toward the main road, neither of them spoke. Emma stared out the window, watching the sky. Luis gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. When they finally reached the paved road, Emma broke the silence. We need to talk about what just happened. I know. That wasn't a drone. I know. So what do we tell them? Luis didn't answer right away. He thought about his wife, his kids, his career. He thought about how crazy it would sound. 3 lights in the desert. A triangle that spun and rose and vanished. 16 minutes of missing time. We tell them the truth, he said finally, and we let them decide what to do with it. But deep down, he knew what would happen. They'd file a report. It would disappear into some database, and life would go on. Except it wouldn't. Not for him. Not for Emma. Because now they knew. The sky wasn't empty, and something up there was watching. When they returned to the station at 130 hours, the place was nearly empty. A skeleton crew manned the radios and surveillance monitors. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a flat, artificial glow that made Luis's eyes ache. Sergeant Ramos met them at the door. He was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with gray stubble and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too many long shifts. Equipment malfunction? He asked, arms crossed. Yes, sir, Luis said. Total system failure. Everything came back online after about 15 minutes. And during those 15 minutes, Luis hesitated. Emma jumped in. We observed unusual aerial phenomena. 3 light sources moving in formation. We attempted to investigate, but lost all electrical systems when we approached. Ramos studied them both. Unusual aerial phenomena. That's what you're going with. That's what we saw, sir. He sighed. Come to my office, both of you. They followed him down a narrow hallway to a small room cluttered with filing cabinets and stacks of reports. Ramos closed the door and gestured for them to sit. He remained standing, leaning against his desk. I've been doing this job for 26 years, he said quietly. And in that time, I've heard a lot of strange stories. Lights in the desert. Objects that move in ways they shouldn't. Encounters that don't make sense. He paused. Most of the time there's an explanation. Smugglers with drones. Military exercises no one bothered to tell us about. Atmospheric phenomena. But sometimes... He trailed off, shaking his head. Sometimes what? Emma asked. Sometimes there's no explanation. And when that happens, the best thing you can do is write it down, file it away, and move on. Because if you don't, if you keep digging, you'll drive yourself crazy trying to understand something that might not have an answer. Luis felt a chill run through him. You've seen them too. Ramos didn't answer directly. Write your report, be specific, include everything. Then go home, get some sleep, and come back tomorrow like nothing happened. Sir, with respect, something did happen. I know, and your report will reflect that. But Luis, Emma, listen to me. This isn't the kind of thing that gets you promoted. It's the kind of thing that gets you reassigned, or worse, laughed at. So you document it, you move on, and you don't talk about it outside this building, understood? They both nodded, though Luis felt a knot of frustration tightening in his chest. Ramos meant well. He was protecting them, but it still felt like being silenced. Good, now go write those reports. I want them on my desk before you leave. It took Luis nearly 2 hours to write everything down. He described the lights, the triangle formation, the way the objects moved, the system failures, the missing time. He tried to be clinical, factual, but every time he reread a sentence it sounded insane. 3 glowing orbs hovering in the desert, a triangle that spun like a top. 16 minutes that felt like 3, Emma finished before him. She set her report on Ramos's desk and stood by the door, waiting. When Luis finally handed his in, they walked out together into the parking lot. The sky was still dark, but the horizon had begun to lighten with the first hint of dawn. You okay? Emma asked. I don't know. You? No, not really. They stood there for a moment, neither ready to leave. Finally, Emma spoke again. Do you think anyone will believe us? Honestly? No. But at least it's on record. For what that's worth. Luis looked up at the fading stars. Somewhere up there, beyond the atmosphere, beyond the edge of sight, was an answer. He was sure of it now, and that certainty felt heavier than anything he'd carried in his 11 years on the job. Get some rest, Emma said. I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. He watched her drive away, then climbed into his own truck and headed home. The roads were empty. The city was still asleep. But Luis didn't feel tired. His mind raced, replaying every second of the encounter. The lights, the silence, the feeling of being watched. When he pulled into his driveway, the house was dark except for the porch light his wife always left on. He sat in the truck for a long moment, hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. Then he got out, locked the door, and went inside. His wife, Sophia, was asleep on the couch with the TV on low. He turned it off and covered her with a blanket. Then he walked to his daughter's room and stood in the doorway, watching them sleep. They looked so peaceful, so safe. He wanted to keep them that way. He wanted to protect them from the vastness and strangeness of the world. But how could he protect them from something he didn't understand? He closed the door quietly and went to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, stood at the window, looking out at the backyard. The sky was lighter now, purple fading to blue. Somewhere out there the sun was about to rise. Another day, another shift, another night in the desert. And somewhere above it all, something was watching. Luis didn't sleep that day. He tried, lying in bed with the blinds drawn and a fan blowing stale air across the room. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw the lights, amber orbs pulsing in the dark. A triangle spinning, rising, vanishing. By noon, he gave up. He showered, dressed, and sat at the kitchen table with his laptop. Sophia had taken the girls to her mother's house for the day, so the house was quiet. Too quiet. He opened a browser and typed, Unexplained Lights Arizona Desert. The search results were overwhelming. Thousands of hits, Forums, articles, YouTube videos, conspiracy sites, stories of glowing orbs near Sedona, triangular craft over Phoenix, strange lights along the border. Some accounts were clearly hoaxes. Others felt disturbingly familiar. He found a video from 2017 showing 3 orange lights hovering above the Superstition Mountains. The footage was grainy, shot on a phone, but the formation was unmistakable. A perfect triangle. The comments section was a mix of believers and skeptics. One user wrote, "I saw these exact lights in Yuma last year. They moved like nothing I've ever seen." Silent, deliberate, not drones. Luis clicked on the user's profile. It led to a website called Desert Watchers, a forum dedicated to documenting unexplained phenomena in the Southwest. He created an account and spent the next 3 hours reading. Case after case. Witnesses from Nevada, New Mexico, California, Arizona. Border Patrol agents, ranchers, hikers, truck drivers. All describing similar encounters. Lights that moved with impossible precision. Objects that defied physics. And always, always the silence. One post stood out. It was from a retired Air Force pilot named Marcus Holbrook, who claimed to have chased a triangular craft over the Sonoran Desert in 1998. He wrote, "It accelerated from hover to Mach 3 in under 2 seconds. No sound, no heat signature. My radar couldn't hold a lock. When I reported it, I was told to file it as a training anomaly and forget about it. But you don't forget something like that. It changes you. You start looking at the sky differently. You realize we're not the only ones watching." Luis sat back, his coffee long since gone cold. He wasn't alone. That should have been comforting. Instead, it made everything worse. Because if this many people had seen these things, if encounters like his had been happening for decades, why was no one talking about it? Why was it still relegated to the fringes, dismissed as fantasy or delusion? He thought about Ramos's words. Don't talk about it outside this building. Was that advice or a warning? How many others had been told the same thing? How many reports had been filed away and forgotten? His phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "You up? Need to talk." He called her. She answered on the first ring. "Did you sleep?" she asked. "No, you?" "Not really." "Luis, I've been reading stuff online, stories like ours. There are hundreds of them." "I know. I'm looking at the same thing." "So, what do we do? Just pretend it didn't happen?" "Ramos said..." "I know what Ramos said, but that's not good enough." Her voice had an edge to it, frustration mixed with fear. Something is out there. Something that can shut down our equipment, mess with time, move in ways that break every rule of physics, and we're supposed to just file a report and forget about it? Luis rubbed his eyes. "I don't know, Emma. What's the alternative? Go public? No one will believe us. We'll lose our jobs, our credibility. Maybe, but at least we'd be telling the truth. To who? The media? They'll turn us into a joke. Some UFO nuts who saw swamp gas and freaked out." "It wasn't swamp gas. I know." They were both silent for a moment. Then Emma sighed. "I just need to understand what happened. And I don't think we're going to get answers from the official channels. So, what are you suggesting?" "I don't know yet, but I'm not ready to drop this. Are you?" Luis thought about his family, his career, everything he had to lose. Then he thought about the lights, the way they moved, the way they made him feel. Small, exposed, watched. "No," he said finally. "I'm not ready to drop it." "Good. Then let's meet tomorrow before shift. We'll figure out what to do next." "Okay, where?" "Coffee shop on Grant. Say, 7? I'll be there." He hung up and stared at his laptop screen. The forum posts stared back at him, filled with stories of ordinary people who'd seen extraordinary things, people who'd been dismissed, ignored, or silenced. People like him. He closed the laptop and stood up. The house felt smaller somehow, like the walls had moved in while he wasn't looking. He walked to the window and looked out at the bright, empty sky. Somewhere up there, hidden by daylight and distance, was something that didn't belong. Something that had been watching them, studying them. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't done. The coffee shop was crowded the next evening, filled with students hunched over laptops and retirees reading newspapers. Luis found Emma at a corner table, already halfway through an iced coffee. He ordered a black coffee and sat down across from her. She slid a folder across the table. I made copies of our reports, and I found something else. Luis opened the folder. Inside were their patrol reports, along with several printed articles and what looked like military documents. He picked up one of the documents. It was heavily redacted, black bars covering most of the text, but the header was visible. Department of Defense, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force. "Where did you get this?" Luis asked. "Freedom of Information Act request. Filed it years ago for a college project. Never thought I'd actually need it. Look at page 3. Luis flipped through. Page 3 contained a list of reported UAP incidents, organized by date and location. His eyes scanned down the list and stopped. July 14, 2019. Nogales Sector, Arizona. Multiple witnesses. Object described as triangular light formation. No identification. "That's us," Emma said. "Our report made it into a DoD database. How did you—" "I have a friend in D.C. Works for a senator's office. She helped me dig through some declassified files. This document was released last year, but it didn't get much attention. Most people don't even know this task force exists." Luis read through the rest of the page. There were dozens of incidents listed. Some involved military pilots. Others, civilian aircraft. A few, like theirs, came from law enforcement or border patrol. The descriptions varied, but certain patterns emerged. Lights that moved with impossible speed. Objects that defied radar. Encounters that caused equipment failures. "Look at the dates," Emma said. "There's been a cluster of sightings along the southern border over the past 5 years. Mostly in Arizona and New Mexico, some in Texas." Luis flipped back through the pages. She was right. The incidents were concentrated along a narrow corridor, roughly following the border from California to the Gulf of Mexico. "Why the border?" he asked. "I don't know, but it's not random. Something about this area draws them. Or we're just noticing them more because of the surveillance infrastructure. Cameras, sensors, radar. We're watching the sky more closely here than anywhere else. Maybe, but that doesn't explain why they keep coming back." Luis closed the folder. "So, what do we do with this?" Emma leaned forward. "I want to go back. To marker 19, where we saw them. I want to see if they show up again." "Emma, that's crazy?" "Yeah, I know. But what if they're still there? What if this wasn't a one-time thing? And if they are there, what then? Then we document it, record it, get evidence that can't be dismissed or buried." Luis shook his head. "We can't do that on duty. If Ramos finds out, then we do it off duty. Tomorrow's our day off. We drive out there after dark, set up cameras, and wait. If nothing happens, fine. We tried. But if something does—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. If something did happen, if they could capture it on video, it would change everything. No more whispers, no more redacted reports. Just proof. Luis thought about all the reasons to say no. The risk, the absurdity, the potential consequences. Then he thought about the lights, the way they'd moved, the way they'd made him feel. "Okay," he said, "but we do this smart. Good equipment, multiple cameras, and we tell someone where we're going, just in case." Emma smiled. "Deal." They met at a gas station on the outskirts of Nogales just after sunset the next day. Luis brought 2 high-definition camcorders, a tripod, extra batteries, and a thermal imaging scope he'd borrowed from a friend. Emma had a drone with a 4K camera and her own recording equipment. They loaded everything into Luis's truck and headed west towards Sector 7. The desert was bathed in twilight, the sky fading from orange to deep purple. They drove in silence, both lost in thought. Luis kept glancing at the horizon, half expecting to see the lights already. But the sky was empty except for the first stars beginning to appear. They reached marker 19 just after 2100 hours. The area looked different at night, more exposed. The fence stretched endlessly in both directions, a dark line cutting through the landscape. Luis parked the truck on the access road and they began setting up. Emma launched the drone first, sending it high enough to get a wide view of the area. The camera feed showed nothing but desert. Luis positioned the camcorders on the ridge overlooking the basin where they'd seen the lights. He set them to record continuously, then activated the thermal scope and scanned the horizon. "Anything?" Emma asked. "Nothing yet." They waited. Minutes stretched into an hour. The temperature dropped as night settled in fully. Luis checked the cameras, all recording. He checked the time. 22:14 hours, almost exactly when they'd first seen the light 2 nights ago. Emma. She looked up from her tablet where she was monitoring the drone feed. "What?" "Look." He pointed south. A single point of light had appeared on the horizon, amber-orange, glowing steadily. It was back. Emma grabbed her radio. "I'm bringing the drone closer." "Be careful. Last time everything shut down when we got near." The light began to move, drifting slowly toward them. Luis watched through the thermal scope. The object registered as a bright heat source, but the pattern was strange. It pulsed, radiating warmth in waves rather than a steady emission. "Luis, the drone's picking up something. There's a second light, and a third." He lowered the scope. Sure enough, 2 more lights had appeared, flanking the first. They moved into formation, creating that same perfect triangle. Luis felt his heart rate spike. "Are the cameras getting this?" "They should be. I'm recording on the tablet, too." The triangle drifted closer, maybe half a mile away now. Then it stopped, hung there in the air, motionless. The lights pulsed in sequence 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, slow and deliberate. Then they began to spin. Luis had seen it before, but it was no less mesmerizing the second time. The triangle rotated faster and faster until the 3 lights blurred into a single glowing ring. It held that form for several seconds, then snapped back into triangular formation. "My God," Emma whispered. The triangle began to descend. It dropped toward the desert floor, moving with that same eerie smoothness. No wobble, no drift, just controlled, precise motion. Luis grabbed one of the camcorders and zoomed in. Through the viewfinder, he could see details he'd missed before. The lights weren't uniform. They had structure, layers of luminosity that seemed to fold in on themselves. And between the 3 points, barely visible, was something else. A faint outline. A shape. "Emma, there's something connecting them. Some kind of structure. I see it on the drone feed. It's like a dark triangle. The lights are at the corners, but there's a solid mass in the middle." The object touched down in the basin. The lights dimmed, then brightened again. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a beam shot out from the center of the triangle, sweeping across the ground in a slow arc. It was white-blue, intense, illuminating every rock and shrub it touched. Luis's mouth went dry. It's scanning. Scanning for what? I don't know. The beam continued its sweep, methodical and thorough. When it passed over a cluster of mesquite trees, the vegetation seemed to shimmer, as if the light was affecting it somehow. Then the beam retracted, pulling back into the craft. The triangle began to rise again, slowly at first, then faster. It climbed toward the ridge where Luis and Emma stood, and Luis felt that same pressure returning. The weight in his chest, the low thrum in his skull. Emma, the cameras, still recording, the drone too. The triangle stopped 20 feet above them. This close, Luis could see it clearly. It was massive, easily 50 feet across. The surface was dark, almost black, with a texture that seemed to shift and ripple. The 3 lights at the corners glowed with that same amber warmth, but now he could see smaller lights too, arranged in patterns across the underside. They pulsed like circuitry, a language of light he couldn't begin to understand. He felt the pull again, that sensation of being watched, of being measured. He raised the camcorder, hands shaking, and kept filming. The triangle rotated, slow and deliberate, as if presenting itself from every angle. Then, without warning, it shot upward. One instant it was there, the next it was a pinprick of light high above them. And then it was gone. The pressure vanished. The thrum faded. Luis lowered the camera, breathing hard. Emma stood frozen, staring at the empty sky. "Did we get it?" she asked finally. "Tell me we got it." Luis checked the camcorder. The footage was there, all of it. The lights, the formation, the beam, the craft itself. He looked at Emma, and for the first time in 2 days, he smiled. "We got it." They stayed on the ridge until almost midnight, reviewing the footage on Emma's tablet. Every camera had captured it, every angle. The clarity was stunning. The lights, the rotation, the scan beam, the craft itself hovering directly above them. This wasn't grainy phone footage or ambiguous dots in the sky. This was undeniable. "We need to be careful about who we show this to," Luis said. "If it gets out before we're ready, it could disappear. Or worse, we could disappear." Emma nodded. "We need someone credible. A journalist, maybe, or a scientist. Someone who can't be intimidated or bought off. I know someone. A professor at the University of Arizona, astrophysics. He wrote a paper a few years ago about the scientific search for extraterrestrial intelligence. If anyone would take this seriously, it's him." "Can you trust him?" "I think so. He's not the kind of guy who backs down from controversy." They packed up the equipment and drove back to the city in silence. Luis couldn't stop thinking about what they'd seen. The way the craft moved, the way it scanned the ground. It wasn't random, it had purpose. It was looking for something. But what? And why there? Why that specific stretch of desert along the border? The questions circled in his mind like vultures, offering no answers. When he got home, Sophia was still awake, sitting on the porch with a glass of wine. She looked up as he approached, concern in her eyes. "You okay?" she asked. "You've been different the past few days." Luis sat down beside her. He wanted to tell her everything. About the lights, the craft, the footage. But how could he explain something he barely understood himself? "Work stuff," he said finally. "Just some things I'm trying to figure out." She studied him for a long moment. "You're not in trouble, are you?" "No, nothing like that. Then what?" He looked at her, at the woman he'd built a life with, and made a decision. "Can I show you something?" He pulled out his phone and opened the video file, handed it to her. Just watch and keep an open mind. Sophia took the phone, confused, and pressed play. Luis watched her face as the footage unfolded. The lights appearing, the triangle forming, the craft hovering above them. Her eyes widened, her hand went to her mouth. When the video ended, she looked at him, speechless. "That's what I've been dealing with," Luis said quietly. "That's what I saw 2 nights ago. And again tonight." "Luis, what is that?" "I don't know. But whatever it is, it's real. And Emma and I recorded it." Sophia handed the phone back, her hands shaking. "What are you going to do?" "Show it to someone who can help us understand what we're dealing with. Someone who can make sure this doesn't just disappear. And if it does disappear, if someone tries to stop you?" Luis took her hand. "Then at least we'll know we tried. We can't just ignore this, Sophia, not after what we saw." She was quiet for a long time. Then she squeezed his hand. "Just promise me you'll be careful. Whatever this is, whoever is behind it, they're not going to like people shining a light on it. I know. I promise." 2 days later, Luis met Professor David Thornton at a small cafe near the university campus. Thornton was in his early 60s, with wild gray hair and glasses that perpetually slipped down his nose. He looked like the stereotype of an absent-minded professor, but his eyes were sharp and focused. Luis had reached out through the university's contact system, keeping the details vague. Thornton had agreed to meet, curious but skeptical. Now, sitting across from him in a booth near the back, Luis felt the weight of what he was about to reveal. "Thank you for meeting me, Professor. Call me David, and you're welcome. Though I'll admit your email was intriguing. Unexplained aerial phenomena captured on high-definition video. That's quite a claim." "It's not a claim. It's documentation." Luis pulled out his laptop and opened the video files. "Before I show you this, I need your word that you'll keep it confidential until we figure out the best way to handle it. This could have serious implications for a lot of people, including me and my partner." Thornton's expression shifted from casual interest to focused attention. "You're serious?" "Completely." "All right, you have my word. Now show me." Luis turned the laptop around. The first video began to play. Thornton leaned in, watching intently. Luis could see his expressions shift frame by frame. Curiosity, confusion, disbelief, and finally, something that looked like awe. When the video ended, Thornton sat back. "Play it again." Luis did, then again, and a 4th time. Thornton didn't speak. He just watched, his mind clearly racing through calculations and possibilities. Finally, he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Where was this filmed? Southern Arizona, near the border. And when? 4 days ago. We went back the next night and captured more footage. Thornton looked at Luis, then at the screen. "This isn't a hoax. The movement patterns, the lighting, the way it interacts with the environment. This would require technology we don't have, not publicly at least." "That's what we thought. Who else has seen this? Just my partner, my wife, and now you." Thornton put his glasses back on and leaned forward. "Luis, if this is real, and I mean genuinely real, this changes everything. Not just for science, but for humanity. Do you understand that?" "I think so." "No, I don't think you do." Thornton's voice was intense now. "For decades, we've wondered if we're alone. We've searched the stars, listened to radio signals, sent probes into the void. And all that time, if this is what I think it is, they've been here, watching us, studying us, operating in our airspace with impunity." Luis felt a chill. Hearing Thornton say it made it real in a way it hadn't been before. What do we do? Thornton was quiet for a long moment. We need more data, more footage, multiple angles, multiple nights. We need to establish a pattern, and we need to rule out every possible conventional explanation before we go public. You think people will believe this? Some will, most won't. That's why the evidence has to be overwhelming, irrefutable, and even then, there will be pushback. From the government, from the military, from anyone who benefits from keeping this secret. So you think it is being kept secret? Thornton gave him a long look. If what you've shown me is real, then yes, absolutely. This isn't the kind of thing that goes unnoticed. Someone knows, and they've made a choice not to tell the rest of us. Over the next 3 weeks, Luis and Emma returned to Marker 19 6 more times. Not every night produced results, but on 4 occasions, the lights appeared. Each time, they captured them from multiple angles with different equipment, under different atmospheric conditions. The patterns were consistent. The triangle formation, the scanning beam, the silent, effortless movement. Thornton analyzed every frame, running the footage through software designed to detect manipulation or CGI. Every test came back clean. He consulted with colleagues quietly, showing them pieces of the footage without revealing the source. The responses ranged from fascination to outright fear. One physicist from MIT told him bluntly, "If this is real, we need to be very careful how we release it. Because once it's out there, we can't control the narrative. And whoever made that thing isn't going to be happy about it." By the end of the month, they had over 40 minutes of footage. Thornton had compiled a comprehensive analysis, complete with spectral data, trajectory calculations, and theoretical propulsion models. His conclusion was unequivocal. The object demonstrated technology beyond any known human capability. They met again at the cafe to discuss next steps. "We're ready," Thornton said. "I've written a paper. I'm prepared to present it at the next conference on aerospace anomalies. But once I do, there's no taking it back. Your names will be attached to this. Your lives will change." Luis looked at Emma. They'd discussed this a dozen times, the risks, the consequences, the certainty that nothing would ever be the same. "We know," Emma said. "And we're ready." Thornton nodded. "Then let's make history." The paper was released 3 weeks later, published in the Journal of Anomalous Aerospace Research, a peer-reviewed publication that straddled the line between mainstream science and fringe theory. The title was deliberately understated: Unidentified Aerial Phenomena over Southern Arizona, a multi-source documentation study. Within hours, it was trending online. Within days, it had been downloaded over 1 million times. News outlets picked it up. Some dismissed it as elaborate fiction. Others called it the most significant scientific revelation in decades. Luis and Emma found themselves at the center of a media firestorm. Interviews, press conferences, congressional inquiries. The footage was analyzed by experts around the world. Some called it proof of extraterrestrial visitation. Others insisted it was advanced military technology. No one could explain it definitively. The government's response was predictable. Initial denial, followed by grudging acknowledgement that yes, unidentified objects had been documented along the border, but their origin and purpose remained unknown. The Department of Defense issued a carefully worded statement saying they took all reports seriously and were committed to transparency and further investigation. But behind the scenes, pressure mounted. Luis and Emma were called into meetings with federal agencies they'd never heard of, asked to turn over all original footage, questioned about their methods, their credibility, their motives. Ramos pulled them aside one day after shift. He looked older, tired. "You stirred up a hornet's nest," he said. "We told the truth," Luis replied. "I know, and I respect that. But now you need to be ready for what comes next, because the truth has a way of making powerful people very nervous." 6 months later, the story had faded from the headlines. The initial frenzy had given way to skepticism and conspiracy theories. New crises emerged. Elections, scandals, wars. The world moved on. But Luis and Emma didn't. They continued their patrols, continued their documentation, and on clear nights when the desert was silent and the stars were bright, they watched the sky. Because the light still came. Not every night, not even most nights, but often enough. Silent, deliberate, watching. And now, Luis watched back. One night, nearly a year after the first encounter, Luis stood alone at marker 19. Emma was off duty, Thornton was at a conference in Europe, and Sophia was home with the girls. It was just him and the desert and the infinite sky above. At 22:47 hours, exactly 1 year to the minute, the light appeared. A single amber orb glowing on the southern horizon. Luis didn't reach for his camera. He just watched. The light drifted closer, pulsing gently. Then it stopped, hung in the air for a long moment. And then something new happened. The light split into 3. The triangle formed. But this time it didn't scan the ground. It didn't hover or rotate. It just hung there, directly above him, as if waiting. Luis felt that familiar pressure in his chest, that thrum in his skull, but this time there was something else. A sense of communication, not words, not images, just a feeling, an understanding. They weren't hostile, they weren't indifferent. They were simply here, watching, studying, learning, and maybe, just maybe, trying to understand us as much as we were trying to understand them. The lights pulsed once, bright and warm. Then they rose slowly into the sky, climbing higher and higher, until they were just another set of stars in the endless expanse above. Luis stood there long after they were gone, alone in the desert, beneath a sky that was no longer empty. Because now he knew. We are not alone. We have never been alone. And the universe is far stranger, far more wondrous, and far more terrifying than we ever imagined. Close your eyes and imagine the desert at night. Not the romantic version you see in movies, but the real thing. The kind of darkness that swallows light whole. The kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. The kind of heat that clings to your skin even hours after the sun has set. Now imagine something else. A light where no light should be. A sound that isn't quite a sound. And the sudden, terrifying understanding that you are not alone. This is the story of Deputy Caleb Moreno and journalist Julia Cruz. What they witnessed in the Arizona desert on a September night in 2021 defied explanation. It challenged everything they thought they knew about the world, and it left them with questions that still haven't been answered. Some of you will believe this story, some won't, but for those who've seen the lights, who felt that presence in the dark, you'll understand why they can never forget what happened that night. Let's begin. Caleb Moreno had been a deputy with the Pima County Sheriff's Office for 7 years. At 32, he'd seen his share of difficult situations, domestic disturbances, drug busts, high-speed chases through the desert backcountry. He'd learned early on that the job required a certain kind of calm. You couldn't let fear control you, or you wouldn't survive. But what he experienced that September night tested every ounce of that calm. Julia Cruz was different. She was a journalist, 30 years old, working for a regional news outlet based in Tucson. She'd spent the past 3 months investigating stories along the border. Human trafficking, cartel activity, the humanitarian crisis unfolding in real time across southern Arizona. She'd seen suffering and injustice, and she documented it all with a fierce determination that sometimes bordered on recklessness. That's how she ended up in Caleb's patrol vehicle on a Thursday night, riding along on what was supposed to be a routine surveillance operation. "You sure you want to be out here?" Caleb had asked when she climbed into the passenger seat at sunset. "It's going to be a long, boring night." "Boring is fine," Julia said, adjusting her camera equipment. "I just need footage of what actually happens out here, not the sanitized version." Caleb nodded. He'd dealt with journalists before. Most were looking for sensational headlines, but Julia seemed different. She listened more than she talked, observed more than she judged. He respected that. They headed south on a dirt road that paralleled the border fence, driving through terrain that grew progressively more desolate. Saguaro cacti stood like silent sentinels in the fading light. The mountains to the east were dark silhouettes against a sky that had turned from orange to purple to deep indigo. By 2100 hours, full night had fallen. Caleb killed the headlights and switched to infrared driving mode, using night vision to navigate. The landscape transformed into shades of green and black, alien and otherworldly. "Do you do this every night?" Julia asked quietly. 3-4 times a week. Depends on the sector and the intel we're getting." "You ever see anything unusual?" Caleb glanced at her. "Define unusual." "I don't know. Things that don't fit. Things you can't explain." He thought about lying. Thought about giving her the official line. But something in her tone told him she was asking for real. Not for a story, but because she genuinely wanted to know. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "there are things out here that don't make sense. Lights that move wrong. Sounds that shouldn't exist. Most of the time, there's an explanation. Smugglers with drones, military aircraft on night exercises, your mind playing tricks after too many hours in the dark. And the rest of the time," Caleb was quiet for a moment. "The rest of the time, I don't know." They drove in silence for another 20 minutes. The radio crackled occasionally with updates from other units, but their sector remained quiet. Caleb parked near a rise that overlooked a wide basin, a natural corridor used by people crossing illegally. He shut off the engine and they sat in darkness, watching. Julia had her camera mounted on a small tripod, pointing toward the basin. The infrared lens would capture movement even in total darkness. She adjusted the settings, her face illuminated by the small screen on the back of the camera. "How long do we wait?" she whispered. "As long as it takes." An hour passed, then another. The night was perfectly still. No wind, no animal sounds. Just silence so complete it felt like pressure against Caleb's ears. At 23:17 hours, Julia's camera started acting up. Static flickered across the screen. The image distorted, pixelating and reforming. She tapped the side of the camera, frowning. "That's weird. Battery's full. Memory card is fine." Caleb was about to respond when he saw it. A light on the horizon. Small at first, barely distinguishable from a star. But it was moving, drifting slowly from west to east. "Julia, look." She followed his gaze. The light grew brighter as it moved, pulsing gently. Not the blinking pattern of an aircraft. Something slower, more deliberate. "Is that a helicopter?" she asked. No sound. They listened. The desert was silent. No engine noise, no rotor wash. Just that light moving steadily across the sky. Julia raised her camera and pointed it at the light. The static on her screen intensified immediately, turning the image into a chaos of white noise and distortion. What the hell? She lowered the camera. The static cleared, raised it again. Static returned. Caleb reached for his flashlight, a high-powered tactical unit mounted on his belt. He clicked it on, sweeping the beam across the basin. The moment the light activated, Julia's camera went completely haywire. The screen flashed bright white, then black, then showed fragments of distorted images that made no sense. "Turn it off," she said urgently. "Turn off your light." He did. Instantly, the static cleared. The camera stabilized, showing the normal infrared view of the desert. They stared at each other. "That's not normal," Julia whispered. "No, it's not." The light in the sky had stopped moving. It hung there maybe 3 miles away, perfectly stationary, and as they watched, it began to descend. Slowly at first, then faster, dropping toward the desert floor like a stone in water. But there was no acceleration, no sense of falling, just smooth, controlled descent. "Caleb, are you seeing this?" "Yeah." The light touched down in the basin below them. The moment it made contact with the ground, something extraordinary happened. The sand around the light began to move. Not wind-blown or scattered, it rose in a wave, a ripple that expanded outward from the light source like water disturbed by a stone. The ripple moved in all directions, creating concentric circles of displaced sand. Caleb could see it clearly through his night vision scope, the desert floor undulating like liquid, like something had sent a shock wave through the earth itself. "Jesus Christ," Julia breathed. The light remained stationary, sitting in the center of the disturbed sand. It pulsed, brighter now, casting a pale glow that illuminated the basin. Even from their elevated position a 1/4 mile away, Caleb could feel something. A pressure, a presence. "We should call this in," Julia said. Caleb reached for his radio, keyed the mic, static. He tried again. Nothing but white noise. "Radio's dead." "Try your phone." He pulled out his cell. No signal. Julia checked hers, same result. "Okay," she said, her voice tight with controlled fear. "Okay. What do we do?" Caleb's training kicked in. Assess the situation, identify threats, plan response. But none of his training had prepared him for this. A light that killed electronics, sand that moved like water, complete communication blackout. "We watch," he said finally. "We document what we can, and we don't get any closer." Julia nodded. She repositioned her camera, making sure it was recording. The screen showed the light clearly now, a brilliant point in the center of the basin. The sand around it had settled, but the circular patterns remained visible. Dark rings in the pale desert floor. For several minutes, nothing happened. The light just sat there, pulsing slowly. Then it began to change shape. It elongated, stretching vertically until it formed a column of light extending from the ground up into the sky. The column was narrow at first, maybe 6 feet across. Then it widened, spreading out at the top like an inverted funnel. "What is it doing?" Julia whispered. "I don't know." The column pulsed brighter, and Caleb saw something else. Movement inside the light. Shapes, dark and indistinct, rising through the column like objects caught in a beam. They moved upward slowly, deliberately, ascending into the sky. "Are those?" Julia started, then stopped. Neither of them wanted to say it, but they both saw it. Those shapes weren't random, they had form, structure. They looked almost like... The light collapsed suddenly, snapping back down to a single point. The column vanished, and the light began to rise again, lifting off the desert floor with the same smooth, controlled motion it had descended with. It climbed rapidly, accelerating as it went. Within seconds, it was a pinprick in the sky. Then it was gone. The pressure Caleb had felt vanished. The oppressive silence lifted, replaced by the normal sounds of the desert. Crickets, a distant coyote, wind rustling through creosote bushes. His radio crackled to life. "Unit 12, what's your status? You've been off comms for 18 minutes. 18 minutes. Caleb looked at his watch. According to the timestamp, they'd only been watching the light for 5 or 6 minutes at most. But dispatch said 18. "Unit 12, respond." He grabbed the radio. "This is Unit 12. We're okay. Had a communication issue. Everything's functional now." "Copy that. Report back to station for equipment check." "Roger." He set down the radio and looked at Julia. Her face was pale, eyes wide. She was staring at her camera. "Caleb, look at this." She turned the camera screen toward him. The footage showed the basin, the light descending, the sand rippling. But as the light formed the column, the image began to distort. Not static this time. Something worse. The shapes rising through the light were clear on camera. Too clear. And they weren't objects or debris. They were humanoid. Figures with defined heads, torsos, limbs, moving upward through the column like they were being pulled or lifted. "How many?" Caleb asked. Julia rewound the footage, counting. 7. No, 8. 8 figures. Where did they come from? "I don't know. They weren't there before the light came down, and I didn't see anyone in the basin when we first parked." Caleb felt cold despite the lingering heat. 8 people, taken from the desert, lifted into the sky by something they couldn't identify or explain. "We need to search the area," he said. "Now? If those were people, if they were really there, we need to find evidence. Footprints, belongings, something." Julia nodded slowly. "Okay, but Caleb, if this is what I think it is, we're dealing with something way beyond illegal border crossings." "I know." They gathered their equipment and headed down into the basin. Caleb led the way with his flashlight, sweeping the beam across the sand. The circular patterns were still visible, etched into the desert floor like crop circles. The sand felt wrong under his boots, looser than it should be, almost fluid. In the center of the disturbed area, where the light had first touched down, they found something. A depression in the sand, roughly circular, maybe 12 feet across. The sand at the bottom was darker, fused somehow, like it had been exposed to extreme heat. "Don't touch it," Caleb warned. Julia circled the depression, filming everything. "There's no radiation, right? I mean, you'd have a detector if there was radiation. We don't carry them on standard patrol." "Great, so we could be standing in a hot zone right now." If it was dangerous, we'd already be feeling it. He didn't know if that was true, but saying it out loud made him feel slightly better. They searched the surrounding area for another hour, looking for any sign of the figures they'd seen on camera. No footprints except their own. No discarded items. No evidence that anyone had been there at all, except for the depression, and the circular patterns in the sand, and the 18 minutes they couldn't account for. "We need to show this footage to someone," Julia said, as they climbed back to the patrol vehicle. "Someone official." "Who? Who's going to believe us?" "I don't know. But we have evidence, clear footage. We can't just bury this." Caleb thought about his career, his family, everything he'd worked for. Reporting this could end all of it. He'd be laughed at, dismissed, maybe even fired. But he thought about those figures rising through the light. 8 people, if that's what they were. Gone. Taken. And no one would ever know unless he and Julia spoke up. "Okay," he said finally. "We show it to someone." But we need to be smart about this. We need someone we can trust. Julia pulled out a card from her pocket. I know someone, a researcher at ASU. She studies atmospheric phenomena. If anyone can look at this objectively, it's her. Will she keep it quiet? Until we're ready to go public, yes. They drove back toward the city in silence. Caleb kept checking his mirrors, half expecting to see the light following them. But the sky remained dark and empty, just stars and the thin crescent of a waning moon. When they reached the station, he filed a basic report. Equipment malfunction. No unusual activity. Standard patrol. The lies came easily, almost too easily. Julia waited in the parking lot. When he came out, she was sitting in her car, staring at her camera screen. You okay? He asked. No, but I will be. We both will be. Call your researcher friend. Set up a meeting. Tomorrow, if possible. I will. She looked up at him. Caleb, what do you think those things were? The figures in the light. He wanted to say smugglers or migrants, or anything that made sense, but he couldn't lie to her, not after what they'd both seen. I don't know, but whatever they were, someone took them. And I don't think they went willingly. Caleb didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed next to his wife, Maria, staring at the ceiling while she breathed softly beside him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the light. The column. Those shapes rising through it like souls being drawn to heaven or hell. Around 0400, he gave up. He went to the kitchen, made coffee, and sat at the table with his laptop. He typed, Unexplained Lights Arizona Desert into the search bar and watched thousands of results populate the screen. Most were obvious hoaxes or misidentifications, but some weren't. Some described exactly what he'd seen. Lights that descended and created disturbances in the sand. Beams that lifted objects, or people, into the sky. Encounters that left witnesses shaken and forever changed. One account from 2003 caught his attention. A rancher near Douglas had reported seeing a column of light in his pasture. When he investigated the next morning, he found 7 of his cattle missing. No tracks leading away, no signs of struggle, just gone. Local authorities had blamed rustlers, but the rancher insisted something else had taken them. 7 cattle, 8 figures in Julia's footage. Coincidence? Caleb bookmarked the article and kept searching. By the time the sun rose, he had a folder full of similar reports. Lights, beams, missing people, animals, time. The patterns were undeniable. His phone buzzed, a text from Julia. Meeting set for 2 p.m. today, ASU campus. Can you make it? He replied, I'll be there. Dr. Sarah Martinez's office was on the 3rd floor of the Interdisciplinary Science Building, a cluttered space filled with books, papers, and weather monitoring equipment. She was in her early 50s with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a practical bun. When Caleb and Julia arrived, she was studying a printout of Julia's footage, frame by frame. Sit, she said without looking up. Give me a minute. They sat in worn chairs opposite her desk and waited. Caleb studied the walls, covered with maps of Arizona marked with colored pins. Each pin represented something, though he couldn't tell what. Finally, Dr. Martinez looked up. Her expression was serious, almost grim. Where exactly did you film this? Julia gave her the coordinates. And you're both certain about what you saw? The light, the column, these figures? We're certain, Caleb said. Dr. Martinez sat back, removing her glasses and rubbing her eyes. I've been studying atmospheric phenomena for 23 years. I've documented ball lightning, light pillars, sprites, elves, and every type of natural light phenomenon you can imagine. What you captured on this footage is none of those things. Then, what is it? Julia asked. I don't know, but I can tell you what it's not. It's not military. The military doesn't have technology that can create localized gravitational disturbances strong enough to make sand behave like liquid. It's not atmospheric. Natural phenomena don't create geometric patterns or controlled vertical columns that last for several minutes. And it's not a hoax. The metadata on your footage is intact. This was filmed in real time, exactly when and where you said it was. Caleb felt his stomach tighten. He'd hoped for a rational explanation, something that would let him file this away and move on with his life. But Dr. Martinez wasn't offering that. What about the figures? Julia pressed. What do you make of them? Dr. Martinez pulled up a series of enhanced frames on her computer. I ran spectral analysis on these shapes. They have heat signatures. They're not digital artifacts or lens flares. They were real, physical objects at the scene. People? Possibly. The proportions match human anatomy, but the resolution isn't high enough to confirm details like clothing or facial features. She paused. There's something else. Look at this. She showed them a frame from the moment the light first touched down. In the split second before the sand began to move, there were small heat signatures scattered across the basin. 7 or 8 of them. Those could be people already in the area, Dr. Martinez said. Migrants crossing, or smugglers. The light came down directly where they were. So they didn't come from the light, Julia said slowly. The light came for them. That's one interpretation. Caleb stood up, pacing to the window. Outside, students walked between buildings, living normal lives where lights in the desert were just stars and nothing more. He envied them. What do we do with this? He asked. We can't just sit on it. No, you can't, Dr. Martinez agreed. But you need to be careful. The moment you go public, you'll face scrutiny. Skeptics will tear apart every frame looking for evidence of manipulation. Believers will turn you into heroes or targets, and if there's an official interest in keeping this quiet, you'll face pressure from sources you can't anticipate or fight. Official interest, Julia repeated. You mean the government? I mean whoever benefits from maintaining the status quo, whether that's government, military, or something else entirely. So we just give up? Let those people disappear without anyone knowing? Dr. Martinez shook her head. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you need more evidence. One night's footage, no matter how compelling, can be dismissed. But if you can document this happening again, establish a pattern, gather multiple witnesses, then you have something that can't be ignored. You want us to go back, Caleb said. I think you should consider it. But this time with better equipment. Multiple cameras, radiation detectors, magnetic field sensors, document everything. Julia looked at Caleb. Are you willing to do that? He thought about those 8 figures rising through the light, about all the other reports he'd found online, about the possibility that people were being taken right now, while everyone looked the other way. Yeah, he said, I'm willing. It took 3 days to gather equipment. Dr. Martinez provided most of it. Scientific instruments she used for field research. Julia added 2 additional cameras with higher resolution. Caleb brought night vision gear and communication equipment that hopefully wouldn't fail this time. They returned to the same location on a Monday night. This time, they weren't alone. Dr. Martinez came with them, along with one of her graduate students, a quiet young man named Thomas who looked terrified but determined. They set up on the rise overlooking the basin, positioning cameras at multiple angles and activating all the monitoring equipment. Then they waited. The night was cooler than it had been the week before, temperature dropping into the low 80s. The sky was overcast. unusual for September in Arizona. A thin layer of clouds obscured the stars, creating a false ceiling that felt oppressive. "How often does this happen?" Thomas asked nervously. "The lights, I mean." "I don't know," Caleb admitted. "Last week was my first time seeing anything like that." "But there are other reports," Dr. Martinez said. "Dozens from this general area over the past 2 years. Most are dismissed or ignored. But the consistency of the descriptions suggests something real." They fell silent, watching and waiting. An hour passed, then another. The clouds thickened, and a light rain began to fall, unusual for the season. "Maybe it won't happen tonight," Julia said quietly. "Maybe," Dr. Martinez agreed. "But we're here. We might as well see it through." At 23:41 hours, the equipment began to react. The magnetic field sensors spiked, showing readings that made no sense for the location. The radiation detector clicked softly, registering low but elevated levels, and all 3 cameras simultaneously showed interference on their screens. "Something's coming," Thomas whispered. Caleb scanned the horizon. For a moment, he saw nothing. Then, through the rain and clouds, a light appeared. Not on the ground this time. High above, maybe 10,000 feet, a brilliant point of white luminosity that seemed to burn through the cloud layer. "There," Julia pointed. The light descended rapidly, punching through the clouds and emerging into the open air. It was larger than before, and instead of a single point, it appeared as a cluster of lights arranged in a rough circle. As it dropped towards the desert, the rain around it seemed to evaporate, creating a dry column of air in the otherwise wet night. "Recording?" Dr. Martinez asked. "All 3 cameras," Julia confirmed. The lights reached the ground and spread out, forming a perfect circle maybe 50 feet across. Within the circle, the sand began to glow, phosphorescent and eerie. The glow intensified, and shapes began to form in the center. Not people this time. Something else. Structures, geometric forms that assembled themselves from the glowing sand, rising up like buildings constructed in fast forward. They were angular, precise, made of what looked like crystallized sand fused into glass-like material. "My God," Dr. Martinez breathed. "It's building something." The structures continued to grow, reaching 10 feet, then 15, then 20. They formed a complex arrangement connected by arches and bridges, all glowing with that same phosphorescent light. It looked like a miniature city, alien and beautiful and deeply wrong. Then the structures began to dissolve. They didn't crumble or fall, they simply faded, breaking down into particles of light that drifted upward like glowing snow falling in reverse. Within minutes, everything was gone. The lights lifted off, ascending rapidly back into the clouds. The rain returned, the sensors returned to normal readings, and they were left staring at an empty basin that showed no sign anything had happened at all. Except when Caleb raised his night vision scope, he could see something. Faint traces in the sand where the structures had been. Patterns. Shapes. Like footprints left by something that existed only briefly before disappearing back into wherever it came from. "Did we record that?" he asked. "Every second," Julia said, her voice shaking. Dr. Martinez was already reviewing footage on her laptop. I have no words. This is beyond anything in the literature, beyond anything I've ever seen or heard of." "What was it doing?" Thomas asked. "Building? Testing?" "I don't know. But whatever we just witnessed, it was deliberate, controlled, intelligent." They packed up the equipment in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. On the drive back, no one spoke. What was there to say? They'd documented something that shouldn't exist, something that changed the rules, something that proved the desert wasn't empty at all, but filled with presences and purposes they couldn't begin to understand. As they approached the main highway, Caleb noticed a pickup truck parked on the shoulder, hazard lights flashing. An elderly man stood beside it, waving them down. Caleb slowed and pulled over. "You folks need help?" he called out. The man approached, and Caleb could see he was in his 70s, weathered skin and worried eyes. "You coming from out there?" He gestured toward the desert behind them. "From the basin?" Caleb and Julia exchanged glances. "Why do you ask?" "Because I saw them too, the lights. I've been seeing them for 15 years, ever since I bought my ranch out here. Nobody believes me. My own kids think I'm losing my mind." He looked at their equipment. "But you folks were recording. You saw them too, didn't you?" Dr. Martinez got out of the vehicle. "What's your name, sir?" Raymond Keller. I run cattle on 300 acres about 2 miles north of here." "Mr. Keller, what exactly have you been seeing?" Raymond's hands shook slightly as he pulled out his phone. "I take pictures when I can. Started keeping a log 5 years ago, after I lost my first steer." He showed them his photo gallery. Dozens of images, most blurry, but some remarkably clear. Lights in various formations. Glowing objects near his property, and one photo that made Caleb's breath catch. A perfect circle burned into a pasture. The grass inside it a sickly yellow color that had never recovered. "How many cattle have you lost?" Julia asked, already filming the conversation. 37 over the years. Sometimes they just vanish. Sometimes I find them dead, but not normal dead. Drained, like something took all the fluid out of them. Vet can't explain it. Says it's predators, but I've seen predator kills. This ain't that." Thomas was taking notes furiously. "Have you ever seen the lights up close?" "Once, 3 years ago. I was checking the fence line around midnight. Heard my cows making a terrible noise. When I got there, one of the lights was hovering right over them. Close enough I could feel the heat from it. My truck died. My flashlight died. Even my watch stopped. I just stood there, frozen, while it did whatever it was doing." "What happened to the cows?" Dr. Martinez asked. 3 of them were gone. Just gone. Found tracks leading toward the light, then nothing. Like they walked into thin air." His voice cracked. "I reported it to the sheriff. They wrote it up as theft. Told me to install better fencing. But you can't fence out something that comes from the sky." Caleb felt a surge of anger. This man had been trying to report these incidents for years, and no one had listened. How many others were out there, dismissed as cranks or drunks, while something real and terrifying operated with impunity? "Mr. Keller," he said carefully, "would you be willing to make an official statement, with your photos and logs as evidence?" "Who's going to listen?" "We are, and we're gathering evidence from multiple sources. The more witnesses we have, the harder it becomes to dismiss." Raymond studied them for a long moment. "You folks really believe me?" "Yes," Julia said firmly. "We believe you, because we've seen it too." The old man's eyes welled up. "Thank God. I thought I was going crazy. Thought maybe I should sell the ranch, move somewhere else. But if it's real, if other people see it too, then maybe I'm not losing my mind after all." They spent another 40 minutes talking with Raymond, documenting his experiences and collecting his contact information. He promised to send them his complete logs and agreed to be interviewed on camera when they were ready. As they finally drove away, Julia turned to Caleb. "How many others do you think there are? People like him, seeing things, being ignored. Hundreds, maybe thousands. The border stretches for 2,000 miles. If this is happening in our sector, it's probably happening elsewhere too." Dr. Martinez was reviewing Raymond's photos on her laptop. These images corroborate what we've documented. Similar light formations, similar effects. This isn't isolated. It's systematic. Then why isn't anyone doing anything about it? Thomas asked, frustration evident in his voice. Because acknowledging it means admitting we're not in control, Dr. Martinez said quietly. It means accepting that something else has access to our airspace, our land, our citizens. What government wants to admit that kind of vulnerability? The question hung in the air, unanswered and unanswerable. When they reached Tucson, the sky was beginning to lighten with false dawn. Caleb dropped everyone off and headed home, exhausted but unable to rest. His mind churned with everything they'd witnessed and learned. He thought about Raymond Keller, spending 15 years trying to make someone listen. About the missing cattle and the burned circles in the grass. About all the other ranchers and farmers and residents who'd seen things they couldn't explain and been dismissed as unreliable witnesses. The system wasn't designed to handle this kind of truth. It was designed to process conventional crimes with conventional explanations. Lights in the sky didn't fit. Missing people with no bodies didn't fit. Technology that defied physics didn't fit. So the system ignored it, filed it away, pretended it didn't exist. But ignoring something didn't make it go away. It just allowed it to continue, unobserved and unchallenged, taking what it wanted when it wanted. Caleb parked in his driveway and sat there for a moment, watching his house. Inside, his family slept peacefully, unaware of what existed in the darkness beyond their walls. He wanted to keep them that way. Wanted to protect them from the knowledge that the world was stranger and more dangerous than they knew. But he also knew he couldn't. Not anymore. Because staying silent, keeping secrets, protecting people from uncomfortable truths, that's what had allowed this to continue for so long. The truth needed to be told, no matter how strange it sounded, no matter who didn't believe it. Because somewhere in that desert, in those glowing lights and geometric structures, were answers. And the people who'd been taken deserved to have someone looking for those answers, even if it cost him everything. The footage went viral within 48 hours. Not because they released it intentionally, but because someone leaked it. Thomas, it turned out, had shown the videos to a friend who'd posted them online before anyone could stop him. Within a day, the videos had been viewed millions of times. News outlets picked them up. Experts weighed in. Skeptics called it CGI. Believers called it proof. And Caleb and Julia found themselves at the center of a storm they hadn't wanted and couldn't control. The sheriff's office placed Caleb on administrative leave pending an investigation into whether he'd violated departmental policy by allowing journalists on patrol. Julia's editor at first celebrated the attention, then backpedaled when pressure mounted from unnamed sources to retract the story. Dr. Martinez received warnings from the university administration. Nothing explicit, just suggestions that her involvement might damage ASU's reputation and funding opportunities. Thomas disappeared, his social media accounts deleted, his apartment empty when colleagues went to check on him. 3 weeks after the second incident, Caleb received a visit at his home. 2 men in dark suits, federal credentials that identified them as Department of Defense contractors. They were polite but firm. "We'd like to talk to you about the footage you recorded," the taller one said. His name was Anderson, or so his ID claimed. "I've already given statements to local authorities," Caleb replied. "We're not local authorities. We represent a task force that investigates aerial phenomena. We'd like to understand what you saw." They sat in Caleb's living room while Maria made coffee she didn't offer them. The men pulled out tablets showing enhanced versions of the footage. "This location," Anderson said, pointing to the basin. "How often have you patrolled there?" 2-3 times a month. It's a high-traffic corridor. And prior to the incidents you filmed, had you ever seen unusual lights in that area? Caleb hesitated. Define unusual. Lights that move in ways conventional aircraft don't. Lights that affect electronics. Lights that appear to interact with the environment. Once, Caleb admitted, about 6 months ago, a single light hovering. I reported it. Nothing came of it. Anderson nodded, unsurprised. That report was forwarded to our task force. It's part of a larger pattern we've been tracking. What pattern? The two men exchanged glances. Mr. Moreno, what we're about to tell you is classified. Sharing it outside this room could result in federal prosecution. Do you understand? I understand. For the past 5 years, we've documented over 200 similar incidents along the southern border. Lights that descend, interact with the terrain or with people, then depart. In approximately 30% of cases, individuals present at the scene subsequently go missing. Caleb felt cold. Missing, you mean taken? We don't use that term officially, but yes, that's the practical reality. People are there one moment, gone the next. No bodies, no evidence, just absence. Who's taking them? What's taking them? We don't know. We have theories, none conclusive. What we do know is that these events are increasing in frequency. Whatever is happening, it's accelerating. Then why aren't you doing anything about it? Anderson's expression hardened. We are doing something. We're monitoring, documenting, trying to understand. But how do you defend against something you can't predict, can't track, and can't comprehend? We don't even know if these are hostile acts or something else entirely. People are disappearing. That seems pretty hostile. Or it could be rescue, or relocation, or scientific observation. We simply don't know. He paused. What we need from you is cooperation. Continue patrolling that area. If you see the lights again, document them, but don't approach. Report to us immediately through this number. He handed Caleb a card with a single phone number. No name or organization. And the footage we already recorded, Caleb asked. Will be studied by our analysts, but publicly, we'd appreciate if you'd stop commenting on it. Let it fade from the news cycle. The more attention this gets, the harder it becomes to investigate properly. You want us to shut up? We want you to be smart. Going public hasn't helped anyone. It's just created panic and misinformation. Let us handle this. After they left, Caleb sat with Maria on the couch. She'd been silent throughout the conversation, but now she looked at him with worry in her eyes. Do you trust them? She asked. I don't know, but I don't think we have a choice. There's always a choice, Caleb. You could walk away. Let them handle it. Focus on our family. He wanted to. God, he wanted to. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw those figures rising through the column of light. 8 people. Gone. And no one was looking for them because no one knew they existed. I can't, he said quietly. Not yet. Julia wasn't as compliant. When Caleb called to tell her about the visit from Anderson and his partner, she was furious. They came to you too, she said. Different people. Same message. Stop talking. Stop investigating. Let the adults handle it. Are you going to listen? Hell no. This is the biggest story of my career. Of anyone's career. I'm not letting them bury it. Julia, they can make your life very difficult. Let them try. She published a comprehensive article 3 days later, detailing everything they'd witnessed and including expert analysis from Dr. Martinez. The article went viral again, reaching even wider audiences than the footage had. The response was immediate. Julia's employer terminated her contract, citing ethical violations and unauthorized use of company equipment. Her social media accounts were flooded with harassment from both skeptics and believers. Someone leaked her home address, forcing her to move. But she didn't stop. If anything, the pressure made her more determined. She started a podcast called Border Lights, interviewing other witnesses and documenting the pattern of disappearances along the border. Caleb listened to every episode. Some of the stories were clearly exaggerated or fabricated, but others had the ring of truth. A rancher who'd lost livestock under circumstances identical to what Caleb had witnessed. A Border Patrol agent who'd seen lights and experienced missing time. A migrant who'd crossed into the U.S. and claimed half her group had been taken by something in the desert. The pattern was undeniable. Something was operating along the border with impunity, and officialdom either couldn't or wouldn't address it. 4 months after the initial incident, Caleb received a call from Dr. Martinez. Her voice was tight with excitement and fear. "It's happening again, right now, same location. Can you get there?" "I'm off duty." "I know. But Caleb, if we miss this, we may never get another chance, please." He didn't hesitate. "Give me 20 minutes. He grabbed his equipment and drove south into the desert, pushing his truck faster than he should on the rutted roads. When he reached the rise, Dr. Martinez and Julia were already there, cameras rolling. Below, in the basin, the light was back. But this time it was different. Instead of a single column or a circle of lights, there were dozens of them, scattered across the desert like candles, each glowing with that same amber luminosity. And moving between the lights were shapes, definite, clear shapes. "Are those people?" Julia asked, zooming in with her camera. "I think so," De Martinez said. "But look at how they're moving." The figures weren't walking. They were drifting, floating a few inches above the sand, moving between the lights with slow, dreamlike motion. There were at least 30 of them, maybe more, and as Caleb watched through his night vision scope, he realized something that made his blood run cold. He recognized some of them. Not personally, but from posters. Missing person bulletins that circulated through law enforcement. He saw a young woman who'd disappeared 6 months ago near Nogales, an elderly man last seen crossing near Douglas, a teenager who'd vanished while hiking with her family. "They're the missing people," he said hoarsely. "The ones who disappeared along the border. They're all here." "But why?" Julia asked. "What's keeping them here? What are they doing?" As if in response to her question, the lights began to pulse in unison. The figures stopped moving and turned, all facing the same direction. Toward the center of the basin, where a larger light was forming, growing, building into something massive. "Back up," Dr. Martinez said urgently. "Everyone back to the vehicles, now." They scrambled up the slope, dragging equipment with them. Below, the large light had grown to enormous size, a sphere maybe 100 feet across. It pulsed once, twice, and then exploded outward in a wave of light that washed over everything. Caleb felt it hit him like a physical force. Not painful, but overwhelming. His vision whited out, his hearing vanished. And for a moment, just a brief, terrible moment, he wasn't in the desert anymore. He was somewhere else, somewhere dark and vast and filled with a presence he couldn't name but could feel pressing against his mind. He saw images flashing past. Other deserts, other borders, other worlds. Places where the sky was wrong colors and the horizon curved the wrong way. And he understood, in that moment of disorienting clarity, that the lights weren't random. They weren't malicious. They were collecting, gathering, taking samples from a species that had spread across a world without understanding the consequences. Then he was back, lying on his back on the desert floor, staring up at a normal sky with normal stars. The lights in the basin were gone. The figures were gone. Everything was gone except the evidence burned into the sand below. Circular patterns, geometric shapes, and something else. Footprints. Hundreds of footprints, human and otherwise, leading from all directions toward the center of the basin, then stopping, ending, as if everyone who'd made them had simply ceased to exist at the same point. Julia sat up beside him, gasping. "Did you see that? Did you see where we went?" "I saw something, I don't know what." Dr. Martinez was on her knees, checking her equipment. "The cameras. Tell me the cameras recorded something." They had. All of them. Hours of footage showing the lights, the figures, the final burst, but the most important thing was what the cameras had captured in thermal imaging. The heat signatures of the missing people were still there, in the center of the basin. Faint but present. As if they hadn't disappeared at all. As if they'd just shifted into a different state of existence, still present, but no longer visible or tangible. "They're not gone," Dr. Martinez whispered. "They're still here, just elsewhere." The footage from that night was never released publicly. Not because they chose to bury it, but because it vanished. All the files, all the backups, everything they'd recorded was corrupted or deleted by some means they couldn't trace. Only their memories remained. And the knowledge that something vast and incomprehensible was operating in the spaces between worlds. Collecting specimens, studying civilizations, observing the endless flow of humanity across artificial borders in an ancient desert. Caleb returned to duty eventually. The investigation into his conduct quietly concluded with no disciplinary action. He continued patrolling Sector 7, and sometimes, on clear nights, he'd see lights in the distance. He'd note their position, report it through official channels, and move on. Julia kept running her podcast, though the audience dwindled after the spectacular footage stopped appearing. She interviewed witnesses, documented patterns, and built a case that something was happening along the border that officialdom refused to acknowledge. Dr. Martinez published a paper on anomalous electromagnetic phenomena in desert regions. It was peer-reviewed, cautiously worded, and generated minor interest in academic circles before fading into obscurity. Thomas was never found. The missing people were never found. And the lights kept coming, night after night, year after year, taking one here, two there, building their collection, or conducting their study, or doing whatever incomprehensible thing they were doing. Caleb thinks about them sometimes. The 8 figures from that first night, the 30+ from the second, all the others over the years. Where are they now? What's happening to them? Are they suffering? Are they aware? Or are they, like the heat signature suggested, simply existing in a different state? Still present, but no longer part of this world. Collected specimens in an exhibit that spans dimensions. He doesn't know. No one does. What he does know is that the desert isn't silent. It's never been silent. It's filled with voices calling from somewhere beyond sight, beyond hearing, beyond comprehension. Voices of the taken, the collected, the observed. And on quiet nights when the air is still and the stars are bright, if you stand in the right spot at the right time, you can almost hear them. A susurrus of whispers carried on a wind that doesn't exist, saying things in languages that were never meant for human ears. The desert remembers, the lights remember, and somewhere, in a place that exists between worlds, they remember too. The deputy and the journalist who saw what they shouldn't have seen, who documented what couldn't be documented, who tried to tell the truth in a world that preferred comfortable lies. Whether that remembering is blessing or curse, Caleb has never quite decided. 2 years after the incidents, Caleb received one final visit. Not from federal agents this time, but from someone else, a woman in her 60s, dressed simply, with kind eyes and a sad smile. "Deputy Moreno," she said when he answered his door. "My name is Elena Santiago. My son disappeared 3 years ago while crossing near Nogales. I've been looking for him ever since." Caleb felt his heart sink. "I'm sorry, I don't have any information about missing persons cases." "I know, but I saw your interviews, read the articles about what you witnessed, and I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" "For trying, for caring, for seeing my son and all the others as more than statistics or ghosts, for trying to understand what happened to them." She reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. A young man, maybe 25, smiling at the camera. His name was Miguel. He was coming to work, to build a better life. He never made it. Caleb took the photograph, studying the face. And with a jolt of recognition, he realized he'd seen this man. In the basin, among the drifting figures. Miguel Santiago had been there, caught between worlds, neither here nor gone. "Mrs. Santiago," he said carefully, "I think I saw your son." Her eyes widened. "You did?" "In the desert, during one of the incidents. He was there with others. I don't know what happened to him after that, but he was alive, or something like alive." She closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. Thank you for telling me. At least now I know he's somewhere, that he's not just nothing." After she left, Caleb stood on his porch for a long time, staring south toward the border, toward the desert where the lights still appeared and people still vanished, and the vast machinery of something beyond human understanding continued its work. He thought about Miguel Santiago, caught between worlds, about all the others like him, about the families who would never get answers, about the truth that was too strange and too uncomfortable for the world to accept. And he made a decision. He would keep watching, keep documenting, keep bearing witness, not for fame or recognition or vindication, but for them, for the taken, for the collected, for the voices in the silent desert crying out to be remembered. Because someone had to remember, someone had to care, someone had to keep looking up at the lights and asking why, even if the answer never came. Picture a highway at night. Not the busy kind with streetlights and constant traffic, but the lonely stretches that cut through empty desert. Miles of asphalt ribboning through darkness, with nothing but stars above and silence all around. These are the roads where strange things happen, where the familiar rules of the world seem to bend. This is the story of Arizona State Trooper Diana Reyes and a civilian named Mark Hanley. What they discovered on Interstate 19, south of Tucson, on an October night in 2020, defied every law of physics and reason. It challenged their understanding of reality itself, and it left them with a truth that no one wanted to hear. Some mysteries hide in plain sight. Some terrors lurk not in the sky above, but in the ground beneath our feet. And sometimes the most frightening discovery is that the world we thought we knew is just a thin layer covering something far stranger. Diana Reyes had been a state trooper for 9 years. At 35, she developed the kind of calm professionalism that came from dealing with everything the highway could throw at you. Accidents, DUIs, high-speed chases, domestic disputes in parking lots. She'd seen people at their worst and occasionally at their best, and she'd learned to maintain distance, do the job, stay objective, go home. But what she encountered on October 23, 2020, shattered that carefully maintained objectivity forever. The night started ordinarily enough. She'd begun her shift at 2,000 hours, patrolling the stretch of I-19 between Tucson and Nogales. It was a Friday, which usually meant heavier traffic heading south toward the border. But by 22:30, the highway had grown quiet. Just the occasional semi-truck rumbling north and sparse civilian vehicles heading in both directions. Diana liked the quiet shifts. Time to think. Time to watch the stars. The desert night had a beauty that was easy to miss during the day. When it was just her and the endless road, she could almost forget about quotas and paperwork and all the bureaucratic nonsense that came with the job. She was cruising northbound, about 40 miles south of Tucson, when she saw the vehicle. A silver sedan pulled onto the shoulder with its hazard lights flashing. Not unusual. Probably a breakdown or someone checking their phone. But procedure required a welfare check. Diana activated her light bar and pulled in behind the sedan. She ran the plates through her computer. Registered to Mark Hanley, age 42, Tucson address. No warrants, clean record. She noted the time, 22:47 hours, and radioed her position to dispatch. Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I'm 10-7 at mile marker 62 northbound. Welfare check on a disabled vehicle. Copy, Unit 47. Be advised, no other calls in your sector. Diana grabbed her flashlight and approached the driver's side, staying alert. Even routine stops could turn dangerous. But as she got closer, she could see the driver sitting motionless, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. She tapped on the window. The man jumped, startled, as if he'd been a million miles away. He turned to look at her, and Diana felt a chill. His eyes were wide, his face pale, and his expression was one of pure, undiluted shock. He lowered the window with shaking hands. "Sir, are you all right?" Diana asked, her hand instinctively moving closer to her sidearm. "The light," he whispered. "Did you see the light?" "What light, sir? Are you having a medical emergency? Have you taken any substances?" No, I'm sober. I'm fine. I mean, I'm not fine, but I'm not drunk or high or... God, you're going to think I'm crazy." Diana studied him carefully. His pupils were normal. His speech, though agitated, wasn't slurred. He smelled of coffee, not alcohol. Whatever was wrong with him, it wasn't intoxication. "Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle, please." Mark nodded and opened the door. He got out slowly, and Diana noticed his legs were unsteady. He leaned against the car for support. "What's your name?" Mark Hanley. I live in Tucson. I was driving home from Nogales. I had a meeting there, business stuff. I was just driving, and then I saw it." "Saw what?" "The light, under the road. It was under the road." Diana's hand moved away from her weapon. This wasn't a threat situation. This was someone having a psychological episode or experiencing extreme stress. "Mr. Hanley, there's nothing under the road. It's just asphalt over dirt and rock." "I know what it sounds like, I know. But I saw it, I felt it. My car started shaking and then the light came through. Not from above, from below, from underneath." Despite herself, Diana glanced at the highway. The asphalt looked normal, dark, empty, just a road. "Mr. Hanley, I think you might be experiencing shock or fatigue. Sometimes long drives at night can cause..." "I'm not hallucinating." His voice rose, panicked. "It was real. It's still there. Look, just look." He grabbed his phone from his pocket, hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He pulled up his flashlight app and pointed it at the ground beside the highway. Diana was about to tell him to calm down when she noticed something. The beam from his phone, a fairly weak LED, wasn't just illuminating the asphalt. It was reflecting off something else, a faint glow, barely visible, that seemed to be coming from beneath the surface. "Do you see it?" Mark asked desperately. "Please tell me you see it." Diana pulled out her own flashlight, a high-powered streamlight that could cut through darkness like a knife. She pointed it at the same spot Mark had been illuminating. The beam hit the asphalt, and Something was there. Not on the surface. Through it. A pale, greenish luminescence that seemed to pulse gently, like something alive. "What the hell?" Diana whispered. She moved closer, kneeling beside the road. The asphalt looked completely normal. No cracks, no damage, no obvious source for the glow. But when she directed her light at it, the luminescence became clearer. It was definitely coming from beneath the pavement, emanating upward through solid matter as if the road were transparent. "You see it," Mark said, relief flooding his voice. "You actually see it." Diana stood up, her mind racing. "Stay here, don't move." She walked along the shoulder, sweeping her flashlight across the pavement. The glow was strongest near where Mark's car was parked, but it extended in both directions along the highway. Not continuously, in patches. Pockets of light beneath the surface visible only when directly illuminated. She returned to her patrol vehicle and grabbed her radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I need you to run a check on any underground infrastructure at mile marker 62. Utilities, pipes, cables, anything that might be buried under the highway." "Copy, Unit 47, stand by." While she waited, she walked back to Mark. He was sitting on the ground now, back against his car, looking exhausted. "How long have you been stopped here?" Diana asked. "I don't know. Maybe 10 minutes? 20? My car just died. Right when the shaking started, everything shut off. I coasted to the shoulder and then it came back on. But I couldn't drive. I was too scared to move. The shaking, describe it." "It felt like an earthquake, but localized, just my car. Like something was pushing up from underneath, trying to get through." He looked up at her. "You believe me?" It wasn't a question. Diana nodded slowly. "I see the light. I don't know what it is, but I see it." The radio crackled. "Unit 47, dispatch. No utilities registered at that location. Highway was built in 1989 over undeveloped desert. No pipes, no cables, no infrastructure beneath the roadbed except standard compacted fill." "Copy that, thanks." Diana stood there for a moment, thinking. No utilities, no logical source for a light underground. But the glow was real. She could see it. Mark could see it. Which meant either they were both experiencing the same hallucination, or something was down there that shouldn't be. "Mr. Hanley, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. From the beginning, every detail." Mark took a deep breath. "I was driving north, probably going 70, maybe 75. The road was empty. I was listening to a podcast, just cruising. Then, around 22:30, maybe 22:35, my radio started acting up. Static, then it cut out completely. I figured it was just a dead zone, but then my dashboard lights started flickering. Engine trouble? No, the engine was fine. It was just the electronics. The lights, the GPS, everything flickered like there was a power surge. Then my phone died. Just shut off completely, even though it was at 60% battery." Diana glanced at his phone. It was working now, the flashlight app still active. "It came back on after a few minutes," Mark continued. "But that's when I felt the shaking. It started gentle, like driving over rumble strips. Then it got stronger. The whole car was vibrating. I thought maybe I had a flat tire, so I slowed down to pull over. That's when I saw the light." "Where, exactly?" "In front of me, on the road. It looked like the asphalt was glowing. Not bright, just a faint light showing through, like there was something underneath that was shining up. I thought maybe it was road work, some kind of underground repair, but there were no warning signs, no barriers, just this glow spreading across both lanes." "What did you do?" "I tried to stop, but my brakes felt weird, soft, like they weren't catching. The car kept rolling forward, right over the glowing section, and when I crossed it, that's when everything shut off. Engine, lights, everything. Dead. The car coasted maybe 50 yards and then I managed to steer to the shoulder. And then? Then I sat here, freaking out, until you showed up. I couldn't call anyone because my phone was dead. I couldn't drive because I was too scared. I just sat here watching that glow, wondering what the hell it was. Diana looked back at the section of highway where the light was visible under her flashlight beam. It pulsed gently, rhythmically, almost like breathing. "Mr. Hanley, I'm going to call this in, but I need you to stay calm and stay by your vehicle. Don't touch the road. Don't go near the glowing areas. Understood?" "You're really taking this seriously." "Yes, I am." She returned to her patrol car and opened her laptop. She began typing an incident report, trying to find words that wouldn't sound completely insane. Officer observed anomalous luminescence beneath highway surface. Source unknown. Civilian witness confirms observation. Requesting supervisor response. Before she could submit it, her radio erupted with static so loud she yanked the mic away from her ear. When it cleared, a voice came through. But it wasn't dispatch. It was layered, distorted, almost like multiple voices speaking at once. Then it cut out. Diana stared at the radio. Her hands were suddenly cold despite the warm night air. That hadn't been human. That hadn't been anything human. She grabbed her flashlight and walked back to the glowing section of road. Mark stood up as she approached. "What was that sound?" he asked. "It came from your car radio. I heard it all the way over here." "I don't know." Diana knelt beside the shoulder and pressed her palm against the asphalt. It was warm. Too warm for a night in late October. The heat seemed to radiate up from deep below, pulsing in the same rhythm as the light. "It's getting brighter," Mark said quietly. He was right. The luminescence was intensifying, spreading. What had been isolated patches were now connecting, forming a continuous band of light running along the highway like a glowing river beneath the surface. "We need to move," Diana said. "Both vehicles. Now." "What? Why?" "Because whatever's down there is getting closer to the surface, and I don't want to be standing on top of it when it arrives." They ran to their vehicles. Diana started her patrol car, relieved when the engine turned over immediately. Mark's sedan started as well, and she directed him to pull forward, away from the brightest concentration of light. They drove north for half a mile before pulling over again. Diana got out and looked back. From this distance, she could see it clearly. A section of I-19 approximately 200 yards long was glowing. Not brightly enough to be seen without a flashlight, but definitely visible now that she knew to look for it. The light pulsed, growing stronger with each cycle. "What do we do?" Mark asked, standing beside her. "We wait, and we watch, and we hope nothing comes through." But even as she said it, Diana knew that something was coming. Something that had been waiting beneath the road, possibly for years, possibly for decades. And now, for reasons she couldn't begin to understand, it was rising. They waited in silence, both standing between their vehicles, watching the glowing stretch of highway. Diana had radioed dispatch again, reporting a possible hazard on the roadway and requesting backup. She'd been deliberately vague about the nature of the hazard. Saying there was a light under the road would raise too many questions she couldn't answer. At 23:19 hours, a semi-truck appeared from the south, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Diana grabbed her flashlight and stepped into the road, waving it to flag down the driver. The truck slowed, air brakes hissing, and pulled to a stop. A man in his 60s leaned out of the cab. "Road closed, officer?" "Not officially, but I need you to turn around. There's a potential hazard ahead." "What kind of hazard?" Diana hesitated. Possible structural issue with the roadbed. It's not safe to proceed. The driver looked past her at the highway. From his angle, he probably couldn't see the glow. It was only visible from certain positions, and only when illuminated directly. "All right, officer, I'll take the detour." He glanced at his GPS. "Route 82 to I-10? That'll work. Sorry for the inconvenience." "No problem. Better safe than sorry." The truck performed a careful U-turn and headed back south. Diana watched it go, then returned to where Mark was standing. "How are we going to explain this?" he asked. "When backup gets here, when they start asking questions, what do we say? The truth. That there's a light under the road, and we don't know what's causing it. And when they look at us like we're crazy, then they look at us like we're crazy. But at least we'll have documented it. At least there will be a record that something happened here." Mark nodded slowly. "You know, 3 hours ago, I was a normal guy with a normal life. Boring job, boring apartment, boring routine. Now I'm standing on a highway watching light glow through solid asphalt, and my normal life feels like it happened to someone else." Diana understood exactly what he meant. There was a before and an after in everyone's life. Before, you saw something that changed everything. After, when you could never unsee it. "How long have you been a trooper?" Mark asked. 9 years. "Ever see anything like this before?" "No, you?" "I've seen weird stuff on the internet. Videos, stories. But I never believed any of it. Always thought there had to be a logical explanation." He laughed bitterly. "Guess I was wrong. Maybe there is a logical explanation. Maybe this is some kind of geological phenomenon. Bioluminescent bacteria or some kind of mineral deposit that glows under certain conditions. Do you believe that?" Diana was quiet for a moment. "No, I don't." The light beneath the road pulsed brighter, and for a moment Diana could have sworn she heard something. A sound like humming, deep and resonant, more felt than heard. It vibrated through the ground, through her boots, up into her bones. "You hear that?" Mark whispered. "Yeah." They stood frozen, listening. The humming grew louder, and with it came a sensation of pressure. Not painful, but present. Like the air had become thicker, harder to move through. Then, without warning, a section of the highway about 50 yards from where they stood began to crack. Not violently. Slowly. Fractures appeared in the asphalt, spreading like frost on a window. The cracks glowed from within, filled with that same greenish light. "Oh my God," Mark breathed. The cracks widened. The asphalt buckled slightly, rising as if something were pushing up from below. Diana's instinct screamed at her to run, to get in her car and drive as fast as she could in the opposite direction. But she was rooted in place, unable to look away. The humming reached a crescendo, and then everything stopped. The sound cut off, the pressure vanished, and the light beneath the road began to fade. Within seconds it was gone. The cracks remained, but the glow had disappeared completely. The highway looked dark and dead and ordinary once again. Diana and Mark stood in silence for a full minute before either of them spoke. "Is it over?" Mark finally asked. "I don't know." Diana approached the cracked section of road cautiously, flashlight raised. The fractures were real, not hallucinations. They ran in geometric patterns, too precise to be random. She knelt and examined them closely. The edges of the cracks were smooth, almost fused, as if they'd been cut rather than broken. She played her light into one of the wider cracks, trying to see how deep it went. The beam penetrated maybe 6 inches before hitting what looked like solid rock. No glow, no indication that anything had ever been there. "Diana." Mark's voice was tight. "Look at the shoulder." She stood and turned. Where the glow had been strongest, the dirt and gravel beside the highway showed marks. Not tire tracks. Circles. Perfect circles pressed into the ground, about 3 feet in diameter, arranged in a line parallel to the road. 5 circles, evenly spaced, like footprints. But not human footprints. Diana felt her heart hammering in her chest. "Mr. Hanley, I want you to get in your car and drive to Tucson. Don't stop, don't look back, just go. What about you? I'm staying until backup arrives, but you're a civilian, you don't need to be here. I'm not leaving you alone with whatever made those marks. That's not your decision to make. This is an official police matter now, and I'm ordering you to leave the scene for your own safety." Mark looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Diana's tone told him it was pointless. "Fine, but I'm filing a report tomorrow. I'm documenting everything I saw. They can call me crazy if they want, but I know what I witnessed." "Good, do that. And Mr. Hanley, drive safe, stay alert. And if you see any more lights, get off the highway immediately." He nodded and walked to his car. A moment later, the engine started, and he pulled onto the highway, heading north. Diana watched his taillights disappear into the darkness. Then, she was alone. She returned to her patrol car and checked the time. 37 hours. Backup should arrive within the next 20 minutes. She grabbed her camera and began documenting the scene. The cracks in the road, the circular marks in the dirt, the exact location and dimensions of everything anomalous. As she worked, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Not by anything physical, by something else. A presence that existed just out of sight, observing her with interest or curiosity or something she couldn't name. The desert night had never felt so hostile. At 2351 hours, she heard it again. The humming. But this time it was coming from a different direction. Not from the cracked section of highway, but from somewhere to the east, off the road, deeper in the desert. Diana grabbed her binoculars and scanned the darkness. At first, she saw nothing. Then, maybe 2 miles out, a light appeared. Small, greenish, rising from the ground like a flare, except it moved wrong. Too smoothly, too deliberately. It rose about 50 feet into the air, hovered for a moment, then descended back into the ground. A few seconds later, another one appeared, this time to the south, then another to the north. They were popping up all around her, these lights rising and falling like something was testing the surface, probing for weak points, or sending signals. Diana's radio crackled. This time it was dispatch, and the voice was human and normal and comforting in its mundane professionalism. "Unit 47, backup is en route. ETA 12 minutes. Be advised, supervisor is requesting a detailed report on the nature of the hazard." Diana keyed the mic. "Copy that, dispatch. The hazard is complex. Supervisor will need to see it to understand." "Copy. Additional units are being diverted to establish a perimeter. Fire department has been notified in case of subsurface structural failure. Understood. Unit 47 standing by." She set down the radio and continued watching the lights. They were getting more frequent now, appearing every few seconds in different locations, creating a pattern, a grid, as if whatever was beneath the ground was mapping the area, learning the terrain, preparing. But for what? The first backup unit arrived at 0004 hours. Sergeant Rick Donovan, a 20-year veteran with a no-nonsense attitude and a skeptical disposition. He pulled up beside Diana's patrol car and got out, adjusting his hat. "Reyes, what have we got?" "Sergeant, thanks for coming. You're going to want to see this." She led him to the cracked section of highway, flashlight in hand. As they approached, she pointed the beam at the asphalt. The cracks were clearly visible, geometric and precise. But the glow was gone. "Structural failure?" Donovan asked. kneeling to examine the damage. Maybe, but look at this. Diana guided her light to the circular marks in the dirt. These appeared at the same time as the cracks. No vehicle made them, no equipment was here. Donovan stood and studied the marks. His expression shifted from professional assessment to puzzled concern. What are they? I don't know, but they weren't here before 2300 hours. I checked this section of road earlier in my shift. It was clean. You're saying these just appeared? Out of nowhere? I'm saying I don't know what caused them, but they coincided with other phenomena. What phenomena? Diana hesitated. This was the moment where she either told the truth and risked her credibility or lied and buried evidence. She chose truth. There was a light, Sergeant, under the road, coming through the asphalt. A civilian witness saw it first, then I confirmed it. The light pulsed for approximately 40 minutes, growing brighter until the road cracked. Then it vanished. Donovan stared at her. A light under the road. Yes, sir. Through solid asphalt. Yes, sir. He took off his hat and ran a hand through his thinning hair. Diana, I've known you for 5 years. You're one of the most level-headed officers in the unit. So I'm trying very hard to understand what you're telling me without jumping to conclusions about your mental state. I know how it sounds. Do you? Because it sounds like you're describing something physically impossible. I have a civilian witness, Mark Hanley. He saw it first. His vehicle stalled when he drove over the affected area. All his electronics failed temporarily. He can corroborate everything. Where's this witness now? I sent him home for his own safety. Donovan put his hat back on. All right, walk me through it. Everything, from the beginning. Diana recounted the entire encounter. Mark's frightened state when she arrived. The way her flashlight had revealed the glow beneath the surface. The spreading luminescence. The humming sound. The way the road had cracked from the inside out. And finally, the lights she'd seen rising from the desert around her. When she finished, Donovan was quiet for a long time. Then he pulled out his own flashlight and walked slowly along the highway, examining every inch of the damaged section. Diana followed, giving him space to process. The cracks are real, he finally said. The marks in the dirt are real. Your witness is real. But a light shining through solid pavement? He shook his head. There has to be another explanation. Then what is it? I don't know. Maybe some kind of gas release from underground. Maybe chemical contamination that's affecting the road surface. Maybe... He stopped abruptly. His flashlight was pointed at one of the cracks, and his expression had changed completely. What? Diana asked, moving closer. Look at this. Inside the crack. Diana knelt beside him and looked where he was pointing. Deep within the fracture, barely visible, was something that didn't belong. A thin film of material coating the interior surface of the crack. It was translucent and slightly iridescent, catching the light in strange ways. Donovan pulled out a pen and carefully scraped at the material. A small piece came free and stuck to the pen tip. He held it up to his flashlight. It's organic, he said slowly. Or it looks organic, like some kind of, I don't know, membrane, tissue? That doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't. He stood up, still holding the pen with its strange sample. I'm calling this in to hazmat. Whatever this is, it's beyond our scope. He walked back to his patrol car and grabbed his radio. While he made the call, Diana continued examining the cracks. Now that she knew to look for it, she could see the film coating in several of the fractures. It was thin, almost invisible, but definitely present. What could create something like that? And why would it be inside cracks in a highway? 2 more patrol units arrived, followed by a fire engine. Officers established a perimeter, closing both lanes and diverting traffic to alternate routes. Firefighters set up lighting equipment, flooding the area with harsh white light that made everything look stark and unreal. Under the bright lights, the damage to the road looked even more wrong. The cracks formed patterns that were too regular, too geometric, and the circular marks in the dirt were perfectly round, pressed to exactly the same depth. "This looks deliberate," one of the firefighters muttered to his partner. "Like someone cut the road with precision equipment." "Or something came up from below," the partner replied. Diana turned at that comment. "You've seen something like this before?" The firefighter, a woman in her 40s named Torres, shrugged. "Not exactly like this, but I responded to a call about 3 years ago up near Phoenix. Rural highway, middle of the desert. People reported seeing lights under the road, feeling vibrations. When we got there, we found similar cracks. Never figured out what caused them. Chalked it up to geological instability and moved on." "Did the cracks have that film inside them?" Torres's expression shifted. Yeah, they did. How did you know?" "Because these do too." Torres walked over to examine the nearest crack. She knelt, shining her flashlight into the fracture, and went very still. "Jesus, it's the same stuff, exactly the same." "What do you think it is?" "I have no idea. But whatever it is, it's not natural. And if it's appearing in multiple locations, that means this isn't isolated." She looked up at Diana. "You need to report this higher up the chain. Way higher, because local departments aren't equipped to handle something like this." Before Diana could respond, her radio crackled with a transmission from dispatch. "All units at mile marker 62, be advised. We're receiving multiple calls from civilians reporting lights in the desert west of your location. Descriptions match unusual aerial phenomena. Arizona Department of Public Safety is requesting documentation of any visual sightings." Diana and Torres looked at each other. Then they both turned toward the west, scanning the horizon. At first, Diana saw nothing. Then, maybe 5 miles out, lights appeared. Not single points, but clusters. They rose from the ground in synchronized patterns, dozens at once, creating a grid of glowing markers that stretched across the desert. "Oh my God," Torres whispered. "What are we looking at?" "I don't know, but I think it's connected to what happened here." The lights held their positions for about 30 seconds, pulsing gently. Then they began to move. Not randomly. They contracted, pulling together toward a central point, merging and consolidating until only a single, large light remained. It hovered about 100 feet off the ground, brilliant and steady. "Get your phone," Diana told Torres. "Document this. We need video." Torres fumbled for her phone while Diana raised her own and began recording. The other responders had noticed the light now and were pointing and murmuring among themselves. Some pulled out cameras. Some just stared. The large light began to descend. Slowly, deliberately, lowering toward the ground. As it dropped, Diana felt that familiar sensation of pressure returning. The air grew thick. The humming sound started again, low and resonant. "It's coming down," Donovan said, walking over to stand beside Diana. "Whatever that is, it's landing." "We need to clear this area," Diana said. "Get everyone back to the vehicles. Now." Donovan didn't argue. He began shouting orders, waving responders away from the damaged road and back toward the relative safety of their vehicles. Diana continued filming, her hands steady despite her racing heart. The light touched down about 3 miles away, behind a low ridge. For a moment, the entire western horizon lit up as if the sun were rising. Then the light dimmed, settling into a steady glow that illuminated the ridge from behind. The humming stopped, the pressure vanished, and an eerie silence fell over the scene. What do we do? Torres asked quietly. Diana lowered her phone. We wait, and we watch. And we don't approach unless ordered to by someone with a lot more authority than me. They retreated to the patrol vehicles and watched the glow behind the ridge. Minutes passed. Nothing changed. The light stayed constant, neither brightening nor dimming. It was just there, present, waiting. At 0:39 hours, a black SUV arrived at the scene. No markings, no emergency lights. Just a black vehicle that pulled up and parked at the edge of the perimeter. 2 people got out, a man and a woman, both dressed in plain clothes but moving with the confidence of federal agents. But before they could approach Donovan, another vehicle pulled up. An old pickup truck, battered and dusty, driven by a man who looked to be in his late 60s. He parked haphazardly and got out, moving with urgent determination toward the perimeter tape. "I need to talk to whoever's in charge," he called out. "I know what's happening here. I've seen it before." One of the deputies moved to intercept him, but Diana recognized something in the man's demeanor. Not panic, not curiosity, knowledge, the kind that comes from experience. "Hold on," Diana said, walking over. "Sir, what's your name?" "Gordon Vickers. I live about 15 miles south of here. I was listening to the scanner when I heard about this incident." He pulled out his phone and showed Diana a photo. "This is from my property, taken 4 years ago." The photo showed a section of his driveway, cracked in geometric patterns identical to what they were seeing on the highway. And in the cracks, visible even in the photo, was that same translucent film. "Where exactly on your property?" Diana asked. "My driveway. It happened overnight. I went to bed with normal concrete, woke up to find it like that. Called the county, called engineers, called everyone I could think of. They all said it was settling or freeze-thaw damage, but I've lived here 30 years. I know what settling looks like. This wasn't that." Diana looked at the federal agents who'd been watching this exchange. Agent Carson walked over, his expression neutral but his eyes sharp with interest. "Mr. Vickers, I'm Special Agent Carson. Can you tell me what else you experienced that night?" Gordon looked at Carson, sizing him up. "You're federal. You already know, don't you? You've seen this before. Answer the question, please." "Fine. I saw lights, under the concrete, glowing green-white, pulsing like something alive. My dogs went crazy, barking at the ground like something was trying to dig up from below. I felt vibrations through my whole house, heard humming that made my teeth ache. It lasted maybe 2 hours, then stopped. When I went outside in the morning, I found the cracks." "Did you document any of this?" "I took photos, video too, but the camera kept glitching. Got maybe 30 seconds of usable footage before everything corrupted. I've got the photos though, and I've got soil samples I collected from the cracks. Never had them analyzed because I couldn't afford it and no one would take me seriously anyway." Carson exchanged a glance with Mills. "Mr. Vickers, we're going to need those samples. And your testimony. Everything you remember, every detail, no matter how insignificant it seems. You believe me?" "Yes. We believe you. And you're not the first. There are others like you. People who've experienced these incidents on their property, in their neighborhoods, and been dismissed as confused or delusional." Gordon's eyes welled up slightly. "I thought I was losing my mind. My wife left me over it, said I was obsessed, paranoid. But I knew what I saw. I knew it was real." Diana felt a pang of sympathy. How many people had experienced something similar and been left isolated, doubted, abandoned by those who couldn't accept the truth? "Mr. Vickers," she said gently, "what happened to your driveway after the cracks appeared?" "I had it repaved. Cost me $5,000 I didn't have, but I couldn't stand looking at it every day. knowing something had been there, had touched my property. The new concrete lasted about 18 months before the cracks started appearing again. Different pattern this time, but same material in the fractures. That's when I stopped fighting it. I just accepted that whatever's down there isn't going away. The cracks are still there now? Some. They come and go. Sometimes I wake up and find new ones. Sometimes old ones fade or fill in on their own. It's like the ground is breathing, like something underneath is alive and active. Carson pulled out his tablet. I'm going to show you some images. Tell me if any of them match what you've seen. He scrolled through dozens of photos. Cracked roads, sidewalks, driveways, parking lots, all with similar geometric patterns, all with that same organic material visible in the fractures. Gordon pointed to several, confirming he'd seen identical formations on his property. These are from all over southern Arizona, Carson explained. 73 documented incidents over 8 years. The frequency is increasing, and the pattern is spreading north, moving away from the border region. Why the border? Gordon asked. What's special about that area? We don't know. One theory is proximity to underground formations we don't fully understand. Another is that whatever's creating this phenomenon originated near the border and is expanding outward. But theories are all we have. No concrete answers. Diana's radio crackled. Unit 47, this is dispatch. We're receiving reports of ground vibrations from residents in Green Valley. Multiple callers reporting items falling off shelves, pictures moving on walls. Any seismic activity at your location? Diana felt her stomach drop. Green Valley was 12 miles north of their position. Negative, dispatch, no seismic activity here. Copy, we're checking with USGS for earthquake data. Carson was already pulling up a map on his tablet. Green Valley, that's consistent with the expansion pattern. Whatever happened here tonight, it's spreading. How far? Diana asked. No way to know. This is the most active event we've documented. Previous incidents were isolated, localized. This one seems to be triggering secondary responses across a wider area. Gordon stepped closer, looking at the map. You see this line here? He traced a route with his finger. That's roughly where the old indigenous trading routes used to run, before the Spanish, before any European settlement. My grandfather was Tohono O'odham. He told me stories about places where the ground was sacred, where you weren't supposed to build or dig because it would disturb what lived below. What lived below? Mills asked, suddenly interested. He called them the Beneath Ones. Said they were older than humans, older than the desert itself. They lived in the deep places and mostly left us alone. But if you disturbed their territory, they'd remind you who was really in charge. Carson and Mills exchanged a look that Diana couldn't quite read. Mr. Vickers, we're going to need you to tell us everything your grandfather told you. Every story, every detail. You think old indigenous legends are connected to this? We think every piece of information matters. Science can only take us so far when we're dealing with something this far outside normal parameters. Historical knowledge, traditional stories, they might contain truths that got dismissed as superstition. They spent another 20 minutes interviewing Gordon, documenting his experiences and collecting his contact information. Mills arranged for a team to visit his property and collect the soil samples he'd kept. Throughout it all, Diana noticed something. Gordon seemed relieved. After years of being dismissed and doubted, someone was finally taking him seriously. When Gordon finally left, promising to send everything he had to the federal task force, Carson turned to Diana and Donovan. What he said about indigenous territory. That's not the first time we've heard that connection. At least 3 other witnesses have mentioned similar stories passed down through their families. warnings about certain places being forbidden or dangerous. You think there's something to it? Donovan asked skeptically. I think cultures that lived here for thousands of years probably knew things about this land that we've forgotten or ignored. Whether those stories are literal truth or metaphorical warnings based on observed phenomena, they're data points we can't dismiss. They approached Donovan, showed him credentials that Diana couldn't see from her position, and began talking in low voices. After a few minutes, Donovan waved Diana over. Trooper Reyes, these are Special Agents Carson and Mills. They're with a federal task force investigating anomalous phenomena. They'd like to debrief you. Agent Carson, a tall man in his 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes, extended his hand. Trooper, we understand you were the first responder to this incident. Diana shook his hand. That's correct. And you witnessed the luminescence beneath the roadway? Yes, along with the civilian witness, Mark Hanley. We'll need to speak with Mr. Hanley as well. But first, we need your account, everything you saw, everything you experienced. Don't leave anything out, no matter how strange it seems. They moved to a quieter spot away from the other responders. Diana recounted the entire encounter for the third time that night, including details she'd left out of her earlier reports. The way the light had pulsed in rhythm with the humming, the heat radiating from the asphalt, the sensation of being watched. Agent Mills took notes while Carson listened intently. When Diana finished, he nodded slowly. Trooper Reyes, what I'm about to tell you is classified. By listening to this information, you're agreeing to maintain strict confidentiality. Do you understand? Yes, sir. What you witnessed tonight is part of a larger pattern we've been tracking for approximately 8 years. Lights beneath roads, highways, and other infrastructure. Structural failures with no clear geological cause. The appearance of that organic material inside cracks. We've documented over 70 similar incidents across Arizona, New Mexico, and Southern California. Diana felt a chill. 70? And no one knows about this? The information is compartmentalized, need-to-know basis only. We brief local law enforcement on a case-by-case basis, but we don't release information to the public. Why not? Carson glanced at Mills before answering. Because we don't know what we're dealing with. We have theories, but no concrete answers. And releasing information about something we can't explain or control would cause panic. What are your theories? The most likely explanation is underground phenomena of unknown origin. Possibly biological, possibly technological, possibly something we don't have terminology for yet. Whatever it is, it's sophisticated, it's deliberate, and it's spreading. Spreading how? The incidents are increasing in frequency. 8 years ago, we saw maybe 1 or 2 events per year. Now we're seeing 2 or 3 per month. The affected area is expanding, moving north from the border region, and the phenomena are becoming more overt, more visible. Like whatever's down there is either growing bolder or running out of reasons to hide. Diana looked toward the ridge where the light still glowed. What's over there? What landed? We don't know yet, but we're going to find out. A specialized team is en route. They'll investigate the landing site and collect samples. In the meantime, we need you and your fellow responders to maintain the perimeter and keep civilians away. For how long? As long as it takes. Carson handed her a card with a phone number. If you see or experience anything else unusual, call this number immediately. Not dispatch, not your supervisor. This number. Someone will answer 24/7. Am I being recruited? You're being informed. You're in the field. You see things civilians don't. We need officers like you to be aware and alert. To document and report, that's all. But Diana knew it wasn't all. By involving her, by briefing her on classified information, they'd made her part of whatever this was. She couldn't walk away now even if she wanted to. After Carson and Mills left to examine the damaged road, Diana returned to her patrol car and sat in silence. The night had transformed from routine patrol to something out of a fever dream. Lights under the road, strange organic material in the cracks, federal agents with classified briefings, and somewhere beyond that ridge, something that had descended from the sky or risen from the earth. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Mark Hanley. Are you okay? What's happening there?" Diana hesitated, then replied, "Can't discuss details, but thank you for your witness statement. Stay safe." His response came quickly. "You too. Call me if you need anything." "I mean it." She pocketed her phone and stared at the glowing horizon. Somewhere out there, answers existed. Explanations for the lights, the cracks, the feeling of being watched by something vast and incomprehensible. But Diana suspected those answers wouldn't provide comfort. Some truths were too strange to offer reassurance. Some mysteries were better left unsolved. Yet she knew she'd keep searching anyway, because that's what you did when the world revealed its hidden face. You looked, you documented, you bore witness, even when you wished you could look away. The specialized team arrived at 0147 hours in a convoy of unmarked vehicles. They set up a forward operating base in the parking lot of a closed rest stop half a mile from the damaged road. Diana watched from her position at the perimeter as they unloaded equipment that looked military-grade. Sensors, cameras, radiation detectors, and other instruments she couldn't identify. Sergeant Donovan had been pulled aside by Agent Carson for another briefing. When he returned, his expression was grim. "They're going to investigate the landing site," he told Diana. "We're to maintain position here and monitor the road. If anything else happens, we document it and call it in immediately." Did they say what they think it is? No, but they're treating it like a potential biohazard. Hazmat protocols. That tells you something. Diana nodded. "Sergeant, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Do you believe what I saw? Really believe it?" Donovan was quiet for a moment. "I believe something happened. Whether it's what you think it is or something else entirely, I don't know. But the physical evidence is real. The cracks, the material, the witness testimony. That's all real. So, yeah, I believe you saw something significant. But not necessarily a light under the road. I'm reserving judgment on the specifics until we have more information. That's all I can do." It was a diplomatic answer, and Diana respected him for it. Belief required a leap that not everyone was capable of making, especially without first-hand experience. At 0203 hours, Diana's radio crackled with an update from the investigation team at the landing site. "Forward base, this is Team Alpha. We've reached the target location. Beginning initial assessment. Copy, Team Alpha. Proceed with caution." Several minutes passed, then, "Forward base, we have visual confirmation of disturbed ground. Large circular depression, approximately 50 meters in diameter. Soil shows signs of heat exposure. Collecting samples now." Diana listened intently to the back-and-forth transmissions. The team was finding evidence of something having landed, but so far nothing definitive about what it was. "Forward base, we're detecting elevated radiation levels. Low, but present. Recommend establishing wider exclusion zone." Carson's voice came through. "Copy that. Pull back to safe distance and mark the site. We'll bring in specialized equipment for further analysis." The investigation continued throughout the early morning hours. As dawn approached, the glow behind the ridge finally faded, disappearing as if it had never been there. The desert returned to its normal appearance, quiet and empty under the lightening sky. At 0547 hours, as the sun broke the horizon, Diana finally got permission to leave her post. She'd been on duty for nearly 10 hours, most of it standing guard over a cracked highway while something unknowable operated just out of sight. She drove back to the station in a daze, her mind struggling to process everything she'd witnessed. The daylight made it all seem unreal, like a vivid nightmare that faded in the morning sun. But the images were burned into her memory, the light pulsing beneath the road, the perfect circular marks, the grid of lights in the desert, the glow behind the ridge. At the station, she filed her report, then went home and collapsed into bed, fully clothed. Sleep came immediately, deep and dreamless, a mercy after the strangeness of the night. She woke at 1400 hours to find her phone full of missed calls and messages. Some from colleagues, some from media outlets who'd somehow gotten wind of the incident, and one from Mark Hanley. She called him back first. "Diana, thank God," he answered on the first ring. "I've been watching the news. They're saying it was a sinkhole on I-19. A sinkhole? Is that what they're calling it?" "That's the official explanation. But we both know it wasn't a sinkhole. Mr. Hanley, I can't discuss active investigations. Please don't do that. Don't shut me out with official language. We both saw the same thing. We're both living with the knowledge that something is under the roads we drive on every day. I need to talk to someone who understands." Diana sat on the edge of her bed, rubbing her eyes. "Okay, off the record, you're right. It wasn't a sinkhole. But that's the story they're using to keep people calm. What really happened after I left?" She told him about the federal agents, the investigation team, the landing site, the radiation and heat signatures. All the evidence pointing toward something real and physical and completely outside normal human experience. When she finished, Mark was quiet for a long time. "So what do we do? Just pretend everything's normal? Drive on roads that might have something underneath them, something we can't see or understand?" "I don't know what else we can do. Report it to who? The media won't take us seriously without proof, and even with proof, they'll just sensationalize it. Going public would ruin our credibility and accomplish nothing. So they win, whoever they are, whatever's down there. They win because we're too scared or too smart to speak up. It's not about winning or losing. It's about not having enough information. We saw something strange, yes? But we don't know what it means. Is it a threat? Is it harmless? Is it even aware of us? Without answers to those questions, what would we even be warning people about?" Mark sighed. "You're probably right. Doesn't make it easier, though." "No, it doesn't." They talked for another 10 minutes. Two people bound by a shared experience that they couldn't fully explain even to themselves. When they hung up, Diana felt slightly less isolated. At least one other person knew. At least she wasn't carrying this alone. Over the next 3 days, Diana tried to return to normal patrol duties. But every time she drove past mile marker 62, she felt a tightness in her chest. The road had been repaired with temporary patches, and highway crews were scheduled to do a full resurface the following week. The official story remained a sinkhole caused by subsurface erosion. No mention of lights, no mention of the organic material, no mention of federal investigators or landing sites or any of the strangeness that had consumed that October night. On the 4th day, Diana received a call from Agent Carson. "Trooper Reyes, can you meet me at the rest stop near your incident location? There's been a development." She drove south, finding Carson waiting in his black SUV. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept much since their last meeting. "What's the development?" Diana asked. "The sample analysis came back. The organic material from the cracks, it's not from the Earth." Diana felt the ground shift beneath her feet. What? The molecular structure doesn't match anything in terrestrial biology. The closest analog would be certain extremophile bacteria, but even that's a stretch. Whatever this stuff is, it didn't evolve here. So what does that mean? Where did it come from? Carson pulled out a tablet and showed her a series of images, microscopic views of the material, showing strange, intricate patterns. We think it's some kind of biological probe or sensor. It appears to be designed to interact with infrastructure, specifically roads and highways. Why roads? That's what we're trying to figure out. One theory is mapping. Roads follow human settlement patterns. By infiltrating the infrastructure, whatever created this material could be gathering data on population distribution, traffic patterns, resource allocation. You're saying something is studying us. That's one possibility. Another is that the material serves a different purpose entirely. Communication, maybe, or resource extraction. We simply don't have enough data to say definitively. Diana looked at the images on the tablet. Has this been reported to the public? No, and it won't be. The potential for panic is too high. We're containing this at the federal level, working with a small group of scientists who have clearance. For how long? If this stuff is spreading, if there are 70 documented incidents, eventually someone's going to figure it out. Eventually, yes. But not today. Not until we understand what we're dealing with and how to respond. Carson put the tablet away. Trooper Reyes, I'm telling you this because you're going to see more of these incidents. You patrol this corridor regularly. You'll likely be first responder to future events. I need you to be prepared and informed. What should I do if I encounter another one? Document, report, and maintain distance. Don't touch the material directly. Don't let civilians near it. And call the number I gave you immediately. We'll handle the rest. After Carson left, Diana sat in her patrol car for a long time, staring at the desert. Somewhere beneath her, possibly right under the parking lot where she was parked, that strange material might be present. Invisible, silent, gathering data or sending signals or doing whatever unknowable thing it was designed to do. The thought made her skin crawl. She drove back to the highway and continued her patrol, but everything looked different now. Every crack in the asphalt made her wonder. Every odd behavior from her vehicle's electronics made her alert. The road had become unfamiliar territory, a thin layer of normalcy concealing something vast and alien. At 2015 hours, as the sun set and darkness reclaimed the desert, Diana pulled over at mile marker 58. She got out and walked to the edge of the highway, looking south toward where the incident had occurred. In the fading light, she thought she saw something. A faint glow, barely visible, beneath the asphalt. It was so subtle, she couldn't be sure it was real. Maybe just her imagination, primed by recent events to see patterns that weren't there. She grabbed her flashlight and pointed it at the spot. The beam revealed nothing unusual, just ordinary road surface. But then she turned off the flashlight, letting her eyes adjust to the darkness. And there it was. Unmistakable. A soft luminescence beneath the pavement, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Diana pulled out her phone and called the number Carson had given her. It rang once before someone answered. "This is Monitoring Station 7. This is Arizona State Trooper Diana Reyes. I'm seeing the luminescence again, mile marker 58 on I-19. It's active right now." "Copy that, Trooper Reyes. A team is being dispatched. Estimated arrival, 40 minutes. Can you secure the area?" "Affirmative. Do not approach the affected section. Do not let civilians near it. We're tracking you via GPS. Help is en route." Diana set up flares to divert traffic and radioed for backup. While she waited, she watched the glow intensify. It spread along the highway wider than before, covering both lanes and extending onto the shoulders. A car approached from the north. Diana flagged it down before it could reach the glowing section. An elderly couple, confused by the sudden roadblock. "Sorry, folks, there's a hazard ahead. You'll need to take the next exit and detour around." "What kind of hazard?" the driver asked. "Potential structural failure. It's not safe to proceed." They grumbled, but complied, turning around and heading back north. Diana watched them go, then returned her attention to the road. The glow was brighter now, almost visible without artificial light, and the humming had started. That deep, resonant sound that vibrated through everything. This time, she was ready. She positioned her dashcam to capture the scene and set her phone to record video as well. Whatever happened next would be documented from multiple angles. At 20:47 hours, the road began to crack. Just like before, fractures appeared in geometric patterns, spreading from the center outward. The glow intensified, shining through the cracks like light through broken glass. Then, something new happened. The cracks didn't just spread, they opened. Sections of asphalt lifted slightly, tilting up as if hinged from below. And through the gaps, Diana saw movement. Something beneath the road shifting and adjusting, pushing against the underside. She zoomed in with her phone camera, trying to capture detail. The movement was methodical, almost mechanical. Whatever was down there was working, performing some task with careful precision. The backup units arrived, followed minutes later by Carson's black SUV. The federal agent got out and stood beside Diana, watching the scene unfold. "It's more active than the first incident," he observed. "Yes, and look at the way the asphalt is lifting. There's something physical down there, not just light." Carson pulled out a thermal imaging device and scanned the area. "You're right, I'm reading multiple heat signatures beneath the surface. Concentrated masses, moving in coordinated patterns. What are they doing?" "I don't know. But whatever it is, they're doing it with purpose." For 20 minutes, they watched the activity continue. The lifting and adjusting. The light pulsing through the cracks. The methodical, deliberate movement that spoke of intelligence and intent. Then, as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The asphalt settled back into place. The light faded. The humming ceased. And the highway looked almost normal again, except for the new cracks that hadn't been there before. Carson's team moved in immediately, setting up equipment and collecting samples. Diana retreated to her patrol car and reviewed her footage. Every second was captured clearly, undeniable documentation of something anomalous occurring beneath a public highway. Agent Mills approached her vehicle. "Trooper, we're going to need copies of that footage for our investigation." "Of course." Diana transferred the files to a thumb drive and handed it over. "What do you think we just witnessed?" Mills glanced back at the damaged road. "Honestly, I think we witnessed something trying to break through. Whatever's down there, it's getting more aggressive, more persistent. And I'm not sure how much longer the road is going to hold." "Hold against what?" "That's what keeps me up at night. We don't know what's coming, how many there are, or what happens when they finally break through completely. All we can do is monitor, document, and prepare. Prepare how? That's above my pay grade. But somewhere, people are making plans, contingencies, because this isn't going to stay contained forever." After the team finished their work and the area was secured, Diana completed her shift and drove home. It was past midnight when she pulled into her apartment complex. She sat in her car for a moment, looking at the parking lot's asphalt surface, wondering what might be underneath it. Was the material there too? Were there tunnels or chambers, or unknown spaces beneath every road and parking lot and building foundation? Had humanity unknowingly built its entire civilization atop something that was now waking up or revealing itself, or making its presence known? The questions were overwhelming. the implications terrifying. But Diana was too wired to sleep. Instead, she opened her laptop and began researching. Not just UFO sightings or conspiracy theories, but geological surveys, indigenous history, construction records. If something was beneath the roads, there might be patterns in where and how it appeared. She found a database of highway construction projects dating back to the 1960s. Cross-referenced it with the locations Carson had mentioned, and discovered something interesting. Every affected site had been built over areas that geological surveys had flagged as anomalous subsurface formations. Nothing dangerous enough to prevent construction, just unusual. Pockets of unexpected density, strange magnetic signatures, zones where ground-penetrating radar gave inconsistent readings. Diana pulled up a map and marked each location. The pattern was undeniable. A rough line running parallel to the border, roughly following what Gordon had identified as ancient trading routes. And the incidents weren't spreading randomly. They were moving along specific corridors, following underground formations that predated any human construction. She was about to dig deeper when her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Trooper Reyes, this is Dr. Sarah Bellamy. I'm a geologist with the University of Arizona. Agent Carson gave me your number. He thought we should talk. About what? About what's happening beneath I-19 and what it means for everything we thought we knew about this region's geological history. Diana sat up straighter. I'm listening. I've been studying the samples from your incident site. The organic material you found in the cracks. It's not just non-terrestrial in origin, it's ancient. Carbon dating suggests it's at least 50,000 years old, possibly older. But here's what doesn't make sense. It's not fossilized. It's not inert. At the cellular level, it's still active, still alive. That's impossible. I would have said the same thing yesterday. But the data doesn't lie. Whatever this material is, it's been dormant in the ground for millennia. And now it's activating, responding to something, growing, spreading. Responding to what? That's what I'm trying to figure out. But Trooper Reyes, I think we're not dealing with an invasion or an intrusion. I think we're dealing with something that's always been here. Something indigenous to this area that humans built on top of without realizing it was there. Diana felt a chill. Gordon Vickers mentioned something similar. Indigenous stories about things living beneath the ground. Exactly. I've been reviewing anthropological records. Multiple tribes in this region have stories about subterranean beings or forces. What if those stories weren't mythology? What if they were accurate observations of something real? If that's true, why is it becoming active now? What changed? I have a theory, but you're not going to like it. Tell me anyway. Dr. Bellamy took a deep breath. I think it's responding to electromagnetic activity. Cell towers, radio signals, the increasing electromagnetic noise from human technology. We've essentially been broadcasting into the ground for decades, and now something down there is responding, or waking up, or trying to communicate. Diana stood and walked to her window, looking out at the city lights. Thousands of electronic devices. Millions of signals crisscrossing the air and penetrating the ground. You're saying we woke it up. I'm saying we might have triggered a response from something that's been dormant. Whether that response is hostile, neutral, or something else entirely, I can't say. But the activity is accelerating. More incidents, stronger manifestations. Whatever's happening, it's building toward something. Toward what? I wish I knew. But Trooper Reyes, I think you need to be prepared for the possibility that what you witnessed tonight wasn't an isolated event. It might be the beginning of something much larger. They talked for another 30 minutes, Diana taking notes on everything Dr. Bellamy shared. When they finally hung up, Diana looked at her notes and felt a growing sense of dread. She couldn't ignore this. couldn't pretend she didn't know. The next morning, Diana called Mark Hanley and arranged to meet him at a diner in Tucson. When she arrived, she found him already there, looking tired but alert. "You said you wanted to compare notes," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "I've been doing research," Mark said, pulling out a folder. "Calling other people who've reported similar experiences. You'd be surprised how many there are. Most of them were ignored or dismissed, but they're out there, and their stories are all consistent." He spread out papers across the table. Witness statements, photos, news clippings about unexplained road damage. "Look at the dates. The incident started small about 8 years ago, but in the last 2 years, they've increased exponentially, and they're all in the same general region." Diana pulled out her own map, marked with the locations she'd identified. When she laid it beside Mark's materials, the overlap was perfect. "We're seeing the same pattern," she said quietly. "Diana, I think something is about to happen. Something big. All these small incidents, they're building blocks, preparations. Whatever's down there is getting ready for something. The question is, what do we do about it?" Mark leaned forward. "We document everything. We connect with other witnesses. We build a case so strong that it can't be ignored or suppressed. And when whatever's coming finally happens, we make sure people have access to the truth." Diana wanted to say it wouldn't work, that the forces suppressing this information were too powerful. But looking at Mark's determined face, at the evidence spread across the table, she realized they had to try. "Okay," she said, "I'm in. But we have to be smart, no wild claims, just facts and documentation. Let the evidence speak for itself." They spent the next hour organizing information, identifying patterns, and making a plan. When Diana finally left the diner, she felt something she hadn't felt in days. Purpose. Diana went inside and poured herself a drink. She stood at her window, looking out at the city lights of Tucson sprawling across the desert. Thousands of people down there going about their lives, completely unaware that something existed beneath their feet. Something that didn't belong. Something that was growing more active with each passing day. Should they be warned? Did they have a right to know? Or was ignorance truly bliss, allowing them to live without the fear that came from understanding how thin the barrier was between normal life and something incomprehensibly strange? Diana didn't have answers. All she had were questions and memories and footage of lights pulsing beneath a highway in the middle of nowhere. Her phone buzzed, a text from Mark Hanley. "Saw the news. Another sinkhole on I-19. Was it really?" She typed back, "No, it wasn't. Are you okay?" "Getting there, you?" "Same. We should talk soon. Compare notes. I'd like that." She set down her phone and finished her drink. Tomorrow she'd wake up and put on her uniform and patrol the same roads she'd patrolled for 9 years. But now she'd patrol them with different eyes, watching for signs, looking for patterns, alert to the possibility that at any moment, the ground beneath her might reveal something that shattered every comfortable assumption about the world. That was her job now, not just enforcing traffic laws and responding to accidents, but bearing witness to something larger and stranger than the bureaucracy was prepared to acknowledge. It was a lonely responsibility, but someone had to do it. And Diana Reyes, Arizona State Trooper, had been chosen by circumstance to be one of the watchers. One of the people who stood at the boundary between the known world and whatever existed beneath it. She would document, she would report, she would maintain her vigilance. Because somewhere under the roads, in the darkness between the surface and the deep earth, something was moving. Something was working. Something was preparing. And when it finally emerged fully, when it broke through completely, the world would need people who'd seen the warning signs, People who'd looked into the cracks and understood that they weren't random failures but deliberate incursions. Diana would be ready. Or as ready as anyone could be when facing something that defied understanding. She turned off the lights and went to bed, knowing that sleep would be difficult. But eventually, exhaustion claimed her, pulling her into dreams of glowing highways and geometric patterns and vast intelligences moving beneath the surface of everything familiar. In the morning, she would wake and return to her patrol, and the roads would be waiting.